G'day guys, good to see you all. I'm sort of recovering from a bit of a hangover last night. Had a few too many vodkas, so yeah, I sort of still a bit not on the ball, not on the game currently. So bear with me if I'm not really on the mark as normal. G'day team, how's it going? I've even got a croaky bloody throat. Yeah, wonderful. You can blame Bar for mine. Not sure about that. And childish humour. No, there's nothing wrong with childish humour. Hey, Christina, good to see you. Miceland. Nice one, nice one. It was on last night with Sky. I actually joined the sort of stream for a while and then, and then fell asleep on the couch. Then woke up in the middle of the night and had to go to the toilet, then went straight to bed. Yeah, it wasn't a pretty picture. God, I've made my coffee, ready to go. All comments? When Paul Saladino blood types, controversial stuff. Paul Saladino's blood type? Yeah, don't know. What, is he a supporter or an opponent of the blood type mythology? Fair enough. Yeah. 7 times more glycating. But probably what I did last night with all that alcohol, the vodkas, and my, well, my mate Jake, he basically has high proof vodka, so it's not the sort of the weak stuff. God almighty. So yeah, that was a bit, especially when I haven't been drinking for a very long time. Occasionally, I mean, the last time is just recently when people retired. I had a couple of drinks, but nothing major. A couple of glasses. That was about it. And it goes to my head because when you haven't drank for a very long time, it just hits you in the head. That's what it did last night. I sort of I got like a second, like an after effect. So I'm really still a bit. Oh, I'm not hungover. I sort of had quite a bit. I had some water. I noticed I was really dehydrated as well in the morning. So I'm not really 100%, so to speak. But I brought that all on myself. I've only got myself to blame for asking for more vodka. Yes. Yeah, I have. Just for, sore throats. That's all. Put a bit in a tea or something like that. But it's not. I don't consider it a food. I sort of consider it some sort of, just to reduce any respiratory sort of issues. So that's my sort of approach. But if you're promoting it as food, sorry, not, I'm not going to basically be supportive of that sort of nonsense. Yeah, look, it definitely glycates 7 times more. Okay, more about water, tap water, key, move down. Any over 1K total dissolved solids will start forming stones inside people. So we're talking about water quality, are we? Where are you located? Ah, text. Oh, okay. Hard water. Ah, fair enough. Yep. Mine's just extra. Yeah, that can be a problem. I think it's a problem in some parts of Australia as well, where there's a lot of mining industry, sort of, and the water can be problematic for the local population. I think even filters really just stuff up continuously. They need to be repaired or replaced. So yeah, it's a bit of an issue for some areas of the world. That's true. Just have a bit more fat. That'll give you a bit of good metabolic water hydration. Some some good old milk, like me. If you can get access to good local spring water, that can be good. I know that places like Italy, parts of Greece, and a few other areas around the world have got really good spring water, but depends. Yes, yes, more on water, water, and more water. G'day, trouble. Everybody's sort of, yeah, just get more K2 into your system. They'll get rid of a lot of that tartar effect. Just more MK4. You can supplement if you want to sort of give yourself a like saturation levels into your body. That's an option. Ah, Charity. G'day, mate. Good to see you.
Hey, Harry. Good to see you too. How are you this week?
Sobering up from last
Sobering up, getting high on life or vodka.
vodka and high proof. My Polish mate. He doesn't basically get the lesser variety. It's usually so. You need another drink, Harry. Come on, have another one. Oh, Jake. I was trying to stop him, but he's just kept on pouring.
I
In Poles and his wife's Russian. They're just as bad as each other.
yeah, I have a close friend that we have a standing tradition not to turn the other person down if one offers the other a drink. We use it very sparingly because we've never refused each other, and in like
Yes, exactly.
7 or 8 years we've known each other. But we recently tried a different kind of vodka that has like a proprietary distilling process that it tastes like butterscotch. I've never had vodka that flavorful before.
Okay.
It was delicious. I had like a half ounce of it.
Mm. Interesting.
I've got my alcohol here with me again this week, so I can't be judging anybody's choices. I'm gonna need to get a spoon for that.
I'm on the oxalate juice. Over
So thick.
there.
What?
Whatever. I just haven't touched it yet. That's the only thing.
Oxalate juice o'clock.
G'day, T2. Yeah, I'm sort of waiting until around 11ish before I sort of, which is still a bit over 18 minutes away.
I've been conflicted feeling about my coffee because I love it so much with cream, but I can't bear to skim the cream off of my milk because I love the milk
Ah,
with the cream in it so much more.
yeah,
So
look,
it's a
I know what you mean.
real
Yeah,
first world problem with raw milk.
it is. God, devastating, isn't it? How awful for you.
Yes.
Yeah. Must be horrendous having to
Um,
put up with that,
I'll be right
those
back.
sort
I
of
need to get a spoon
choices.
for this. It's I can't you can't see in the jar because the sides are coated, but it's this is milk kefir that I've added a little bit of honey to and let it ferment for
Okay,
48 hours. So it's
okay.
probably like I don't know, like 5% or something.
Uh,
But it creates this really thick, like you can see it on my finger here, like
I can see.
whipped cream consistency on the head. It's delicious. It's really tangy, but it won't break up as I try to pour it into my mouth. So I just need to get something to stir it with. I'll be right back.
Yeah, yeah, no problem. Still more about water and water quality in people's homes and okay. Christina. He's on his way. Hello, Pim. Good. Thanks. Thanks. Good to have him here. I just got the tail end. I'll watch it later when I get a chance. Usually in the evenings, I'll watch your because it's just too early for me. Especially when I'm out doing this sort of activity. That doesn't help. He's bathing himself in blue light.
Who, me?
No,
Oh,
no, no.
Vivid
Pim's
Mouse.
just saying, vivid mouse. Why sleeping?
I'm
As I said, he's bathing himself in blue light.
I'm bathing myself in blue light right now as well because I'm not going to bed as soon as I'm done here. So
And you're not wearing your glasses as well.
no, not tonight. Mm.
So what's this? The entire southwest is on fire. Okay. That's in the US, obviously, I suspect. Okay. We don't have clouds. We just have smoke covering everything right now. Well, that's what you get. This happens in Australia as well. See, North America, like Australia, a lot of the indigenous populations, they managed with fire the land, and so they burnt things down to create a lot of plains of grasslands. And so what we've done now is we've allowed far more growth of forest to come back in certain areas, which traditionally wasn't there for thousands of years. And when you actually burn out forests and create grasslands, you change the composition of a whole lot of species, and certain species die out for good. So the sort of species that come back are the ones that tend to basically outcompete some of the ones that actually tend to hold moisture better. So as a consequence, you change the vegetation, and this has happened in Australia and elsewhere, and then you create parks. And this is happening in Africa at the moment, where they've pushed off a lot of tribal populations off certain parts, like the Samburu, the people who are the Bushmen of the Kalahari, and areas like that. And the environment has actually changed and altered, affecting both humans and animals and other plants in those sort of areas. And this is the problem, modern day ecologists who are trying to preserve or keep certain things intact, which basically are something which is modified and it's an outgrowth of past human activity. And that past human activity had a much better type of, control over that sort of vegetation. And so it's changed the type of fuel composition. So it becomes more reactive to sort of these dry spells and stuff like that, and can basically cause far more intense fires. And that's what we're seeing in countries in particular, like parts of Greece, countries in particular like areas sort of Australasia and those sort of areas. And we're seeing it also in places like Southeast Asia, Indonesia, and things like that, where people have come in and literally cut down massive amounts of forests and altered the vegetation in those forests, with palm oil and stuff like that, and made those lands more susceptible to fire. So that's what's really happened, because you go to other parts of Southeast Asia that haven't been altered like that, they're not as susceptible. They still basically have these water holes. They still have these water catchments and other things that actually create like fire breaks and actually reduce the actual spread and intensity of fires. So when you modify an environment, you've got to manage it then. And humans have managed, like North American Plain Indians managed their environment, the Australian Aborigines managed their environment. And when the colonists came in, they changed, they sort of marginalised these communities completely, like what's happened in Southern Africa now with some of the Bushmen of the Kalahari and these sort of populations. And what they do is then they don't really understand how to manage this environment, which has been altered by humans in the past. And now when it comes back in a way where it is more susceptible to these sort of effects. So the best way is actually to go back and learn those old management approaches and actually implement them. And I've seen Aborigines literally light fires, these certain fires, and they will actually say it will flow through this part of the land and go right around and come back to this point. And it's exactly what happens, because they understand the topography and the land and the wind patterns in the certain parts of the year, what they do and what effect they will have, and how they will actually move the fire to remove a lot of that undergrowth. You see it and you go, bloody hell, you could be in some ivory tower academia, you're never going to understand that. This is practical cultural knowledge which has been passed on from generation to generation. If we're not careful and we lose this, we'll never get it back, because it's very hard to acquire unless you're integrated into the land, and we're not. We're just basically, managers, not part of the land, involved, so we don't understand it, and we're seeing it from an ivory tower point of view and saying, oh, that's a problem, there, we need to do this from a very reductionist approach. Those approaches may work in an environment like Northern Europe and places like that, where it's very wet and moist and you hardly ever get the conditions for any fires. But those management practices, ecological management practices, aren't going to work in much drier sort of environments, like in North America, especially areas like California and stuff like that, parts of Australia. The environment is very different. You need to manage it different, and you need to learn that cultural knowledge. So, yeah, it's just crazy sort of stuff. But that's the consequences of, these modern day ecologists who are promoting, let's close everything up and let's not touch it, as if that will make it safe. No, when you do that and you get rid of certain predators and all that, you get basically too many kangaroos in Australia. And those too many kangaroos, you know what they do? They actually reduce the a lot of the actual those small grasses which actually hold moisture, and they dry out the land, and that means the undergrowth around trees becomes much more dry. As a consequence, great kindling for fires. And I suspect similar things have happened in North America, where buffalo used to create these water holes and actually allow other animals to come and actually bring water to the surface and actually reduce the amount of dryness as well. Domesticated animals won't do that because they're not, cows and all that. They originate in Europe. They don't have these behaviors in that regard. So there are a lot of factors. It's a complicated picture, and the problem is these people are just, absolutely idiots in their sort of management. They bring an old world management practice to a new world environment, which is very different. And rather than learning from the populations of those who have managed that land for thousands of years for their knowledge, and then to update it, they basically marginalize them and say, well, you guys are irrelevant, because we can speak academic lingo and we're much smarter.
And then the only response being to patrol the area with water to try to address the fire directly.
Yeah,
just doesn't at all address the problem, which just creates a more intense fire the next time that one catches, right?
Exactly. And this is the problem that you see in these parts of the world. We're seeing it also in parts of Brazil where there's poor land management. They're coming in, they're cutting everything. They are affecting the waterways and stuff like that, and some of their catchments that were traditionally there. Because even the traditional, like the populations that were there, even when they were practicing some agriculture within the Amazon basin, they would cut out certain parts, but they wouldn't alter a lot of the environment around it. So the waterways, the actual catchments and all that were still there to support the general sort of ecosystem the way it worked. But what we're going in there is just with bulldozers and just literally just clearing everything and modifying it and then putting a whole lot of soy, because one of the biggest exports now out of Brazil is soy, product. It's grains. It's not cattle. I mean, cattle, even in Australia, in the Northern Territory, where cattle actually go through the actual, the sort of the grasslands up there, they don't really have an effect because they're just going through. They're not really having a big impact. They're always being moved on, and they're eating a bit of vegetation here. They're moving on to the next, and that's actually a good thing because that's exactly what wild animals do as well. And you've got these big, massive acreages that basically they can move them around, and so you can basically cycle the actual vegetation. So that's less of a problem. It's really grain agriculture where monocrops and stuff like that alter dramatically the ecosystems. So it's the kibble for the vegetards and the sad dieters that basically is what is altering these sort of environments and making them more vulnerable to both erosion, desertification, and stuff like that. So you see it all around the world where these modern type monocrops type things. You see it in Southeast Asia, same sort of things. They've had animals and rice paddy type agriculture and stuff like that. Not an issue because it works with the ecosystem. But these large sort of monocrops don't. These industrial types.
Commercial monocropping has gotten so pervasive that smaller farms can't even buy small combines anymore.
Exactly. Yeah.
They don't make them. Basically, the only companies that can justify the cost of combines, it has to be probably $250,000 rig or whatever. That's
precisely.
40
they're
feet wide.
ginormous things. Exactly.
Yeah.
They're ginormous things. I've seen them. In Australia, it's the same situation with a lot of farmers here as well. They can't buy small rigs. There are ways around it where they can some hire, and some basically have like a cooperative thing where they a couple of farmers in a district. It's not a sort of a formal cooperative. It's just basically they will pitch in and buy certain equipment to reduce the cost for each other, and so they will use it. They'll have a rostering system to be able to use it. And that's a sort of alternative approach that some farmers can use that is helpful. But you need to really trust your neighbors and really be willing to, and I would say if you're going to do something like that, formalize it in a proper contract so everybody knows what the maintenance cost and everything else, everything's above board, so there's no no issues where, people need to make equal contributions and not leave others in the lurch, so to speak. So, you got to do your paperwork as well if you're going to get into those sort of collaborative relationships, because they're not as solid as a corporate entity or a cooperative where you've got, a constitution of a cooperative where you sort of have to comply with certain things and stuff like that. But anyway, we'll move on. G'day, Harut. You've missed me, mate. 1 month. God, it's a while. Yeah, family matters, keeping you busy.
It's been sort of an unusual month for streams, I suppose.
It has been a bit, I sort of took a break from one because I had somewhere to go, so.
Yeah, you missed a week, and Bart's has been a regular, and then he cancelled one. Yeah.
He probably needs a bit of a break.
Pam, you're the consistent one. You need to make sure to keep that schedule up. That's how you grow viewership, unlike these other clowns.
Oops. It just jumped on me. Oh, thanks, StreamYard. Oh, I just got jumped. I've lost the other part. I need my dose. Let's go. Here it is. G'day, Deborah. Good to see you here. Yes. Harry's been very naughty.
With the vodka.
That's it.
So are you on your B vitamin regimen for?
Yeah, I actually did that because I forgot last night. As I said, I actually got on the basically Sky and Bart last night were doing a live stream, and I sort of jumped. Yeah, I sort of jumped on, and and then after that, I sort of got a bit tired. I sort of walked towards the couch and just sort of fell asleep on the couch. So yeah, I think that's how it sort of happened. And then after I got up in the early hours in the morning, and I was busting for a leak, so I went to the toilet. And then I realised what time it was, and I go, it was 4:40 or 4:50, I can't remember now. And so I went straight to bed after that. Oh, God, yeah. So it just, when you haven't been doing it for a while, you haven't been drinking, it really just hits you.
Oh yeah, I drink pretty infrequently, so I've never been one to gain much of a tolerance for it, actually, and I've never done it often enough.
Look, Christina, I wasn't actually expecting. Normally, when like with the two events that I've had, the two retirement get-togethers in a pub, I basically had 2 B complex vitamins before I went there, and then 2 after. So no hangover, no issue. I was absolutely fine. But last night this was unplanned. I was down after my long walk. Then basically because we'd done about all up by the time we got up to Jake's place, me and my mate. I think Sean said 15 Ks we had done the walking for that day. And I wasn't planning. I was going to go straight home. And then, he said, let's just go up and say hello to Jake, because he had actually also heard he's had a back issue or some sort of thing. And so I went up and saw him, and in that regard. So basically that's what I did at that time. I was sort of heading home, and then I said, so I wasn't planning at all, so I didn't take anything. I wasn't even hydrated, because after a long walk, I usually go home, I'll have a bit of hydration and stuff like that, but I hadn't even hydrated or anything. I just went straight into alcohol. First thing, 2 glasses on the actual bench. And basically, there wasn't much in the gin bottle. And then, because I said, my mate Sean had the gin, and I just basically said, yep, give me the vodka. And he said, it's high proof. And I go, yeah, I know the sort of stuff you get, but I was just looking at just having one drink, and that was about it. And then because he's sort of it's like a moonshine thing, 70% proof.
Oh wow.
So yeah, so basically, well, these are Russian. His wife's Russian, and he's Polish. I mean,
We can't buy
these
more than 50% where I live.
they grow up on this sort of stuff. I mean, we have grappa, and which is also very high. We call it cipro, which can be as high as 70% proof as well. So it's really, high octane stuff. And I've brought it into work in the past. And I can tell you, there's quite a few people that got drunk very quickly. But yeah, sort of.
You can't buy more
I
than 50% in stores where I live because of provincial law.
Okay,
It's
quite restricted. Yeah,
stupid, but yeah.
yes, it's. Am I looking? Really? Thanks, Ian. I'd even look better if if I didn't ingest all that alcohol. I suspect.
No, that's the secret, obviously.
Must be. I need more alcohol. Caught a stream, watching from the toilet. Been on it all day. God, that doesn't sound good. What have you been doing to your
or
gut?
on the toilet all day?
Exactly. Looks like what sort of stream? Yes. Yeah, I've heard that. Just keep drinking. It's an old wives' tale or whatever.
Yeah, for a friend of, the same friend who I mentioned actually about the vodka that we shared last week. He was hungover from us. I guess he had gone out and had a headache, and I brought him a B vitamin and some kefir, and knocked it right out of him.
Exactly. Yeah. If you get the B vitamins in early, if you basically your system, you go right through the night and your liver is detoxing. Obviously, by the time you get in the morning, it's not going to make much of a. Well, it will. It's probably going to cut off that after effect, but it's not going to really make much of a difference. You've already had all that, toxin in there, basically having to be dealt with. So, and it depletes a lot of the B vitamins. That's the thing. It depletes a lot of choline, B vitamins, and stuff like that. And so you sort of have to replenish that sort of stuff. And by the time I got up, and replenished it, it had less of an effect. But it'll probably, going forward through the day, it's probably going to be a better effect. So, but I got myself to blame after all. Paul is against the blood type. Okay, that's good. On that, I agree with him. Yeah, there is no science. I know there was back in the 90s. There was a bit of some sort of naturopathic doctor that was pushing it. There was some science at the same time. Some academics did some science. Somebody told me that there was some sort of review paper in more recent times, but I haven't seen it. So, because it doesn't interest me really, it's all bogus. And even that science back in the 90s actually demonstrated that basically, it doesn't matter what sort of antigens you've got on your blood type. It really doesn't affect. I mean, I think that from memory, because I haven't. The A type was sort of like the agricultural, but it's the original. I mean, all the chimps, the apes, and all that. And we know that, from all the stuff that I've shown you guys, they ate up to a ton of meat a year. So and when they're given an opportunity in a savanna environment, they even innovate and get into hunting. So and the sort of starvation foods they're having is anyway green foods, anyway to extract more fat, short chain fatty acids and things like that. So it's really, and their cecum is like a second stomach that can actually ferment and utilize some of that sort of stuff. But that's about it in that regard. So I can't remember how many millions of years ago the O type actually emerged. And the other types are very recent. It's in the Middle East. like the sort of those sugar molecules that are on the actual the A and B type, or the B type and the AB, are very prominent in the Middle East, in those areas, but we don't really understand why. The Middle East was also a big crossroad. Some people say, oh, it could be the grains that they consumed in that area. Maybe, but maybe not. It could be a crossroad, because there was a lot of, like, the Middle East was a crossroad for Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo sapiens, and also movement of a lot of people between the Eurasian steppe and parts of Africa. And so that was where there was a lot of mixing of genes. And we know that there's far more sort of antigens, coating the actual your red blood cell. So well over 30 odd from memory. So basically, that sort of environment would have been very conducive for these sort of mixed, people that had a B, or people that had an A, to combine, in families, because that was it was like a melting pot, the Middle East, that part of the world at the time, as populations were pushing out, into Eurasian steppe, and from there veering off into Europe and other parts of the world. So I suspect it's more to do with that bottleneck in the Middle East that brought about the more recent types, than anything else. That's sort of my sort of theorizing, than anything else. But nobody else come up with anything better. But I agree with Paul on this. He's definitely right. It's BS, pretty much.
Luke just posted a meme. That's why I'm smiling.
Yeah. I'm just about to.
That's very accurate, Luke. That's very accurate.
Just about to put it up.
That's it.
Skimming the cream to put it on coffee. Drinking whole.
That's exactly it, Luke. You understand my plight.
God, it must be stressful, mate. You are truly you are truly suffering.
It's tough starting your day with that existential of a decision.
Oh, mate, it must be so difficult and awful for you.
Well,
are you doing any yoga for it, mate, or taking any stress medication?
No, I've thought about just quitting coffee for it instead. Just eliminate the problem at the source. That's the real reason not to drink coffee.
Well said. Well said. Anyway, we've had our fun. We'll move on. Trouble drinking. Drinking? You have the Asian or Jewish drinking gene. Oh, yes. That is true. There is that gene. I forget I used to actually remember. I actually quoted it to somebody.
That's the one that produces the Asian flush or whatever, the Asian glow from.
Yeah, that's
drinking.
it. Exactly. It creates the Asian flush. If you got that, you've got less tolerance to alcohol.
Right.
Luckily, I've actually checked that gene and I don't have it, which is good.
And it's likely that it's just like inflaming you instantly when you drink it.
Yeah. So, it's more niacin to me. I must have a niacin gene somewhere I haven't discovered. Yes, I can definitely do it. That bad. Get off the toilet. Oh, God. What are people putting into their mouths? I don't know. Ah, yes. Well, there was a bit of, tonic water in that.
Good quality vodka has flavor. It's not going to be as complex as Scotch,
Exactly.
but good quality vodka is not just pure ethanol.
No, definitely isn't. It's got a. You know, I will throw out a random question. Since nicotine is from the nightshade family, is it inflammatory then? Right, I brought up because the mention of alcohol. Nicotine. Look, probably for people from the Americas that are indigenous to the Americas, who have consumed nightshades for a very long time, are probably going to be less susceptible to nicotine. And we know that even the Inuit was smoking, and they never had any sort of word for cancer or cardiovascular disease or anything else. So they seem to manage it better in that regard. I don't know of the exact genes that may be involved. I haven't actually looked into those specific genes and whether they are related to the nightshades or not. No idea. But there is susceptibility. There are genes. I've actually seen them, but I just can't remember them off the top of my head. Doesn't help when you've actually had a few drinks as well. But because they do, there are some genes that actually do affect the way your body detoxes, things like nicotine as well. So that's you've got the if you've got good detoxification capacity, you should be able to tolerate a bit better the sort of the compounds in nicotine way better than other people. But whether the exact same compounds exist in other nightshades, I haven't really looked into the actual tobacco leaf to really, because remember, like in any plant, some of the things that go into a leaf are not the same things that go into the fruit, like deuterium as an example, and many other things. So I don't really know enough about the tobacco leaf to really give you a good answer on that. And basically, I'm not really interested in tobacco leaves, even though my auntie did cultivate them back in the 70s. And I was involved in a bit of working and helping them out on the land to pick tobacco leaves. So usually start from the bottom and you sort of work up. So as you're moving through, so you cycle through the leaves, and yeah, but I don't really know enough to really. Do you? What about yourself, Jared? Know enough about the
No, I couldn't say.
chemical?
My thoughts would be that I think I'm not sure how smoking tobacco as a means of consuming nicotine would compare with eating as well.
Yeah, it's a different thing because one's going into the sort of lungs and respiratory system. The other is going directly. So I don't think the compounds you find in nightshades are going to be the same thing, but there may be other compounds, alkaloids or whatever, that may have some sort of effect on that tissue, which may mimic the inflammatory effect you get from the same sort of from those other compounds in nightshades. But
yeah, I'm sort of skeptical about a lot of the health claims that are pinned causally on tobacco smoke and nicotine, specifically because it's not very well controlled for well-produced tobacco, since there's basically no such thing. It's quite likely that the tobacco that you're smoking is contaminated with environmental toxins, heavy metals. It's definitely laced with lots and lots and lots of pesticide, these sorts of things. That I'm really interested in what the difference might be between just a pure natural, so to speak, tobacco leaf, traditionally processed.
The thing that a lot of
cigarettes, and it's most of the studies on tobacco smoke are with cigarettes, which I'm not at all saying are in any way unambiguously bad for you. I'm not saying they are ambiguously bad for you. I agree cigarettes are bad. I'm sort of skeptical about that being innate to tobacco itself.
Yeah, that's something I haven't really looked into, and I think that if you were to basically get a native tobacco leaf and sort of process it in the traditional way and then smoke it, maybe it had less deleterious effects
Mm-hmm.
in that regard. Because if you think, I mean, the tarring issue is still going to be a problem. The tarring issue,
The way it
that's still going to
paralyzes
be
the
a
cilia in your lungs, and
exactly, yeah,
yeah.
that's still going to be a problem. And it's the same thing with fireys. People that are firefighters have similar problems as well from smoke inhalation. So
Mhm.
I don't think that part is indisputable, but I think that there is also other chemical compounds that differentiate the something which is in nature and something that has been highly processed, and a lot of chemicals have been used that we know are quite carcinogenic in that regard, and they potentially may be the real causal root of some of the things that we blame on the
Mhm.
tobacco in general. You
Mhm.
know, because there are populations that smoke quite a bit, like the Inuit. They never
Yep.
had a word for cancer. They never had
Well, just
cancer.
like
So
I have a very sharp palate for cannabis, and it's something that I'm really bothered by, that a lot of people don't particularly care about how their weed is produced. And so just anecdotally extrapolating from the massive variety in the quality of the experience with smoking
mm,
cannabis, depending on how it's produced, I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that a similar variance would occur with tobacco, and there isn't a lot of variety in how it's produced for the commercial market. So
yeah, that's the thing. It's really hard to know exactly yeah, what the differences would be, because we've got no clinical or randomized control studies. One,
mm,
because they're not ethical. All the studies that were done in free living people. Yes, they are very statistically significant in terms of, like, the odds ratio is something like 20 to 30 odd in some cases, or down to 10 in other cases. And anything over 3, you can start writing up a hypothesis. Anything above that, and there is some good evidence that when smoking declines in certain parts of the world, there is lower admissions into hospitals. And also there was a
mhm.
study in the UK and one in America, but I can't remember the state. And they actually looked at, there was legislation in there to reduce smoking in public places, which cut back on people's amount of smoking. And as a consequence, the admissions for cardiovascular incidents went down. So I don't think it causes cardiovascular incidents, but what it does is it can exacerbate them.
Mm.
It's an additional stressor. So if you've got underlying conditions, it probably is that thing that broke the camel's back, so to speak. And I think that's where these sort of additional stresses, but you could basically have a cardiovascular disease and do intense exercise and induce yourself a heart attack. So does that mean exercise is bad? No, it just means that somebody who's more vulnerable may be at greater risk to these hermetic stresses or whatever, these additional stresses. So even on that point, I'm not convinced on pure tobacco, but I'm sort of more convinced about, the sort of processed modern day with all the chemicals and other things.
Yeah.
It probably has some deleterious effects. Combine that with the general poor diet, it probably, it's a recipe for disaster for a lot of people. But if you've got a cleaner diet, you've got a cleaner source, maybe it's less of an issue. And if you smoke it in a cultural way, less, the occasional now and then, smaller consumption levels, which traditionally these populations did as well. It was a sociable thing, like we sit around and have a few drinks. Same sort of thing that was done by a lot of the sort of the populations in the Americas at the time. So that's why I'm I'm in this sort of halfway house, and I sort of differentiate one from the other, but I don't know enough about the compounds to basically really give you, a definitive sort of answer to that. So there's a lot of
I
question marks on what I've stated. There's a lot of question marks. That means because the science is epidemiological in nature, yes, it's only looking at one factor, which means that the strength of the epidemiology tends to be less confounded. But there are still some confounders there. And those confounders in more recent times, in more recent years, those confounders are more orientated around dietary approaches. So we don't have good studies that go back like in the 50s or 60s or earlier when the consumption was high and the diet was slightly cleaner. And we know that a lot of the Japanese, especially older Japanese, smoke like heathens and still outlive a lot of the Americans.
I mean, smoking
but is
was not.
is it the additional omega-3s that they get in their diet by eating a lot of fish that basically is a protective thing? See, this is the thing. We haven't really looked sufficiently at the question to really be able to answer either way.
Right. I wonder how the incidences of smoking correlate with the incidences of MIs, along with just sort of along the lines of Chris Nobby and the vegetable oils that he's.
I don't think they actually align as clean.
Yeah, because I'm just smoking as a habit is not exactly new.
That's right.
But the knowledge of it being this causal link to heart disease and respiratory problems does seem to be. There's a lot to control for. Even with this question specifically, like nicotine in isolation, I'm sure would also be different from in a whole plant form. So
that's right. Yeah. And in small amounts, it actually can have positive neurological effects.
Yeah, that's a massive. That's most of what piques my interest about this stuff is that I'm not interested in taking up smoking. Obviously, I'm not going to do that. But nicotine as both as a nootropic and as a stimulant, it's very reliable in terms of the dose response for increasing focus and cognition and mood. So.
Yeah, look, it's a real. I find it a bit of a hard one, because of those sort of reasons as well. Might drink some of this before it gets too cold, like last time. But yeah, let's move on because we've probably fallen really behind. Get past the hard water stuff. Okay, Deborah, I have a question for you, Harry. Pancreatitis, what really causes it and how best to resolve it? There could be a number of factors. Could be a gallbladder issue that can cause it as well. So if you've got, it can be also, it's unlikely to be a zinc issue, like a zinc deficiency, because all the receptors in your pancreas, your beta cells and all that, they are zinc dependent. But I don't, if you're on a carnivore diet, that's less likely. If you come from an old plant-based diet or a SAD diet and you've moved to a more carnivorous diet, you may have, like things, my father had a severe case of pancreatitis due to gallstones. They did come out. It did come out. He had a big gallstone. It eventually got through and ripped right through, because the duct actually goes right through into the pancreas and comes out, where it actually meets with the the sort of the bile meets with the pancreatic enzymes. So they're very close. So as a consequence, if you've got a inflamed bile duct, you can induce pancreatitis. So yeah, so it could be the case, and there's a number of steps. If you need some information, maybe get a scan, find out whether you've got any gallstones as well. That could be a giveaway. Yeah, so try and find out a bit more about it, what the situation is. You need to possibly get your doctor to do a bit more investigation into it. And once you've got some information, if we can exclude a few things, then come back to me or just email me and I'll basically give you a protocol. It depends on what you come back with, what sort of protocol I end up giving you. So otherwise, we could sit here for half an hour giving you multiple different explanations on different ways to resolve. So if people have got any issues and they have scans and they know exactly what it's causing it, let me know and I'll tell you what to do. Just email me, because other people have actually asked me for gallstones and gall flushes and stuff like that, and in that regard, and some of the like malic acid and a few other things to sort of soften the actual stones and other methods. So depending on where you are, what the situation is, sludge and whatever else, if I've got a bit of information, I can give you a better protocol to follow. So yep. Yes, you got a fan there from Pim.
So we've caught up to when I joined.
That's it. You did. We have. God, we are going slow. Or I'm going slow.
That's what happens when I actually contribute to conversation.
Yes, he did. God, he did. Yes, yes, our lovely raw milk standover man. Any thoughts on Dr. Yeah.
How do we pronounce that? Siwas?
I think it's
Siwas
or Cybus or something like that. Anyway, I've actually seen a few of his videos and all that.
It's the first time I'm hearing of him.
Somebody actually asked me to actually check one of his videos, so I did go and actually check it. His content is not too bad. It's sort of it's a mix of low carb and sort of keto and carnivore type.
Oh, I recognize his face.
Yeah. So, but I haven't seen a lot of his stuff. That's the problem. So for me to give you the stuff that I did see wasn't too bad. But to really give you I don't know enough about the actual guy in that regard. Because there may be some little things where he, it's usually like, for instance, like Eric Berger. He's got some good content that actually, and a lot of that, he's got a big, thick biochemistry book, and a lot of that he actually gets out of that book and puts up and does all these little videos and all that. So that's pretty good, helpful. He does a simple explanation of things that are in the book, so you don't have to go and actually look at the book. But some of the other stuff that he throws up there, like nutritional yeast, well, there are plenty of B vitamins in animal foods. Why is nutritional yeast? And many nutritional yeast has also got some anti-nutrients. So why would you put that up as the most important thing for your B vitamins that he touts about? So that's one thing that I sort of disagree. Or the other thing where he talks about a lot of the, having 10 cups of veggies and stuff like that, which is just excessive amount. And when people actually complain that, they're getting gut issues and all that, which normally most people will, he goes, oh, you can go a bit more carnivorous for a while and that should resolve the issue. Well, why not just jettison the whole stuff? Because he's built a bit of a career on, a lot of these supplements which have to do with, these concentrated powders of certain vegetables and all sorts of things. And so for him now to turn his back on that would be very hard. So he sort of now shifts a bit.
Once he started selling supplements, I had a hard time trusting his advice at face value.
Yeah, and that's the problem. He's got some good supplements, but some of the supplements are just, do I really need to take this high dose of crap that's coming from, cruciferous type vegetables?
Yeah.
I mean, do I need an ultra dose of hermetic effect stress on my body when I'm dealing with a whole lot of other stresses?
I'll go with environmental hormesis over molecular hormesis, thanks.
Exactly. Precisely. You know,
My
bit
other
of
issue with Eric
exercise.
Berg is, so I mean, I'm the last person to disregard somebody based on their credential. I'm going to listen to what they have to say personally, but I don't like that he frames himself as a doctor when he is a chiropractor.
That's true.
I don't like that he calls himself Dr. Eric Berg to try to sound authoritative about medicine,
And he's not.
and
He's a
he's
chiropractor.
not
That's
at
right.
all. And to me, that sets off a quack alarm.
Yeah.
That being said, I
Me too.
agree that largely his content's pretty good.
Yeah. So yeah, there is a bit of crack pottery here or there, and some over exaggeration on some points, and some of the actual supplements and some of the food components that he's pushing are probably not the most optimal anyway.
Mm.
It's because he sort of hasn't jettisoned that plant-based component completely. He's still welded to it to a large extent because of his supplements and because of what he's been arguing for a very long time. He thinks he'd lose face because he's got a big following. So, and that big
It's,
following tends to be the sort of middle of the road people that, they want to do a bit, they want to seem to be, oh, I'm doing something a bit more healthy. I'm having a few more vegetables, that sort of mentality thinking. And that's the sort of people that follow him largely. So I think he caters to that as well. He panders to that.
it's not a good place to be when you want someone that's going to be accountable to new information.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, that's nasty. He stuck into your.
I didn't even see that comment when I mentioned that I wasn't wearing them. I knew people would notice that I wasn't wearing them. Yeah, I'm not going straight to bed after the stream, so I figured I'd skip them. I was only planning to drop in for maybe an hour or 90 minutes, which is why I endeavored to get here right at the start before it's too late for me to coherently string words together.
Well, like exogenous oxalates we don't need. The body actually produces oxalates. So our bodies actually produce oxalates. There's a lot of things, substances that our body produces, like glucose. Well, we don't need to eat it. We can produce it endogenously. We don't need to get it from outside. So I disagree if he's saying something like that, because oxalates can do a lot of damage. Let's put it that way, in large amounts. Traditionally populations that ate a lot of vegetables, they combine them with a lot of dairy products to reduce, that means to chelate the oxalates and remove them out in the feces. So, if you're saying something like that, that's where is he? Where's Sally? To give him a bit of a lecture. Sally Horton should really give him a lecture on this. That's okay. That's a bit. I find that surprising, being because most low carb, keto, carnivore type doctors tend to basically be quite emphatic about oxalates. Yes, we do produce some endogenous oxalate, and yes, it is important as well. But putting in a lot of oxalate also can deplete a lot of the actual sulfur amino acids. So that's not a good thing to do that. So I'd have to disagree completely. But I probably have to do a Google search and go and actually see exactly what he said. So I'm not that won't be my final opinion. But if he's actually, he may have actually nuanced it somehow differently. I don't know. I have to basically listen to him. Sometimes people, the way they nuance it or the way they explain it, sometimes isn't clear. People can say the same thing in two different ways and mean something completely different, even though it sounds like something different, if you understand what I mean. So it depends on what the pronunciation or the emphasis. And sometimes people, for clickbait purposes, may play around with words in order to, to get a bit of clickbait activity. So he may not be completely, saying one thing, but sort of, yeah, look, I have to check, Christine, but if he's actually definitively saying something like that, then God Almighty, needs his head examined. But before I'll hold off from judgment until, because I've actually seen one or two of his in the past, and they were quite good. I found them. So I don't want to actually, be judgmental towards him without actually having checked exactly what he said. Sorry, that's a half a question or answer. That's for you, mate.
Yeah, I wish I could. I wish I could just go and buy extra milk. I don't actually. I don't buy the milk that I get, but I get as much as I can already. So if there were extra milk, I would be taking the cream off of it for sure. If I could just get like a gallon straight of cream, that would be great. But I live in reality in Canada, land of no raw dairy access for anybody.
That's it. I mean, even
So
here,
I'm grateful to have the access that I do.
If it wasn't for the form that we get, that cold press type, where they put the bottles in and put the pressure to bust the membranes of the actual bacteria. If it wasn't for that, we would have none in Australia as well. It's really restricted here, and you try and get it off a farmer here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it is possible, but let's say you don't want to mention names because people would be in a lot of trouble. So it's very restricted in this country as well. So New Zealand's pretty good. You can actually buy raw. They've got dispensing machines, so
Mm-hmm.
which is really good. I think that it's out of the only. I think it's the only English-speaking nation on this planet that has raw milk available, from dispensing machines and really freely available for people to be able to access, which is good. I don't know how widespread it is within New Zealand, but it's available.
Yeah, I mean,
I think there's probably people
it
need
would
to be
get sort
registered
of
and monitored.
irritating to have to climb over the mountain of bodies from all of the people who've died of listeria and other contaminants in the milk every time that they've gone to the dispensing machines. But I suppose you just get used to
that. You're so facetious.
Yeah, the raw milk rhetoric just sticks in my craw really badly.
Exactly.
Doesn't make any sense.
Raw milk has never had that problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's only when we started pasteurizing milk where we've had these issues.
Yep.
So, but we're not going to go into the politics now because that would take a long time. That would have to be
We've touched on that before.
Yes, exactly. Is that an invite, Pim? Send me an email. It'll just force me to go to bed early on Friday to get up.
Yeah, Pim stream is easier to make for me for the time that it runs at.
Yeah,
so it's the same time as for Luke, I suppose.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it's just the time. I tried once doing it like very early on a Saturday morning, but the problem there was that it was like Friday night and everybody was out. This was before COVID, and everybody was out. And I go, well, that's not going to work because there was I was getting a handful of people, so I'd gone from getting about 10 people on the stream, and it dropped down to about 2 or 3. And I'm going, that's just ridiculous. So I stopped doing that, and I went back, and then I just went back to the same slot.
You can probably get a bigger audience just standing outside of your apartment.
That's probably it. It was 11 o'clock. I think, was it 11 or 11:30? I can't remember the older one. And then I came back from 11:30, I think. I sort of dropped back to 11 and then eventually to this slot of 10:30, because it basically just puts me at the point where Bart usually has his stream. It either finishes exactly nearly the same time or half an hour earlier. So it always gave me a bit of a buffer for mine to start. And since I was a late comer and, Pim had hers early and all that, and I wouldn't want to have to get up that early every day. Or every Saturday. Every Sunday. God, too much alcohol still in my body. Yes, and so yeah.
This is great. Harry's got a cognitive handicap. I can keep up.
That's it. Yeah, he's not really firing on all 4 cylinders today. Oh God. people have to hide from smoke. Yes, it can be bad. I've been in a situation similar where the whole of Hobart, because there was fires around, and the whole of Hobart had smoked out. It was just really bad. And literally, I tried to put even materials close to the actual, doors and stuff like that, try to keep any air from flowing through. The only problem is that, I had a fan going, so I could keep cool, but it was just so stuffy and so, as a consequence. But that was to keep the actual smoke out. And I kept on checking there's an EPA have got actually a website. They can actually show the particulates in specific areas. And when they went down, I sort of got a bit of ventilation. And when they were going back up, I sort of closed everything down to make sure nothing would get in. But work was really bad because it was coming through the air conditioning.
I have a homemade air purifier. It's just a 20-inch box fan with a 20-inch square furnace filter on it. And I didn't know when I set it up originally, but the next time I switched the filter, you can actually get furnace filters that are they're usually be rated for like a hospital setting, where but you can actually get a filter fine enough that it will filter smoke for not a huge amount of money. I think it's like $30 or something.
I think Luke's has found his new spot on the web. Good for him. Yeah, look, Pim's great to basically operate with. I've done 2 streams with her. Sorry, not streams. 2 different subject matters which we covered together. And I think she enjoyed it and all that. And she has asked me to come back on a stream, but it's quite early. And as I said to her, send me an email and force me to go to bed earlier. Because if I get it and I'm committed to it, it's like Bart did it once. He actually sent me an email and said, can we do one really early in the morning? I said, fine. I said, which day? And he actually picked a day. I can't remember whether it was a Wednesday or a Tuesday or whatever. Yeah. And I just got up. I went early to bed, put the alarm clock on for an earlier time slot because New Zealand is 2 hours ahead. So I basically did the actual the live thing with him, and then after that, I started work. So basically that was fine. Yeah, it worked. It wasn't an issue. But unless I'm committed to something, I'm not going to do it.
It's going to be Pim's stream on her channel. I've streamed with Pim on Bart's channel, but
yep, it's just it's a time difference. We're 2 hours different, so New Zealand's 2 hours ahead of Tasmania. So their 6 o'clock, or my 6 o'clock is their 8 o'clock, which is the sort of time that I'm actually getting up. And that's why you mostly see me either at the tail end of Pim's stream and the early part of Bart's stream, which is around the 8 o'clock sort of mark. But if I have to get up earlier, I can get up earlier. I've had to get up to go fishing or whatever else at 5:30 in the morning or even earlier at 4. So yes, if I have to get up, I do go early to bed and get up and do what I need to do. So especially where if you're going like an hour away to a certain fishing location, you may have to get up at 4 o'clock. You got 1 hour to get there, half an hour to get your shit together. So that that already is 6 o'clock. And that's just in the early hours as basically sun's coming up. It's you sort of there's a bit of activity. Especially when we go for brim fishing and stuff like that. So early hours in the morning. So yeah, or later in the evenings. Usually, sometimes me and Dad used to go like later in the evenings, do the brim fishing, and then sleep in the car, and then wake up early in the morning, get out there, light a small fire, and get stuck into it until just before midday. So we'd get quite a bit of good fishing in east coast of Tasmania. And, in the early part before they get into the river and start eating a lot of the grass, and they're still quite salty. They're quite nice. Because once they get a lot of that grass, they get the flesh, its taste changes. I don't really like it. So we go specifically earlier in the season, try and catch as much as possible, store it in the fridges and stuff like that. So yeah, it's good stuff.
I've never been much for fishing because I never used to eat very much fish. But now that I do have a better taste for fish, it's probably something I should consider getting
Yeah,
into a little bit
I'm
more.
pretty good at it. Sort of different types of fish. You need different types of not only bait, but also when you're actually using lures and differently weighting them sort of as well, because certain fish attack in a certain profile. So you got to know your profile of the fish. The other thing is, I mean, I go to places everybody's fishing and nobody's catching, and I will basically throw in a certain way and literally bring it in and just tap tap tap, create vibrations in the actual water, and then hold it down so I can actually keep it sort of so it's not basically too loose, but just enough for the fish to basically strike, that tapping, so it will flow through the water in a certain way. It makes it like a fish in distress slightly. Very deceptive, but it works. And people just fucking hate me. They're sitting there for hours, trying to fish, and here I turn up and I get two. I was there this was down further south and I think my mate Sean was there as well. Actually, I can't remember. Did he come? I can't remember. I know my brother-in-law. No, it was with my brother-in-laws, with Bethro and Anthony, and they said, "What the fuck? What is up with you?" So yes.
Did you share your secrets with them?
I sort of told them after. So bragging rights, mate. Bragging rights. I had to tell them later, because
you need to cultivate a certain mystique around your abilities.
Exactly. Telling people everything, then they get an advantage over you in that regard. I'm very competitive when it comes to hunting and fishing. So somebody actually is misfiring, and I can see that they're actually having, their sight isn't actually properly set. I'm not going to tell them. I want to get the damn thing. I can be quite competitive. Once I get it, then I may help them out. But I want to be the first. Yeah, exactly. I got the first one. God, you boys aren't really doing much today, are you? And then I may help them or fix up the site or whatever.
That's very noble of you.
Yeah. After that, I sort of succumb.
Come in and steal their fish and then belittle them.
The guilt factor, and feel an obligation to help them out a bit. Yes, that's when I suppress my competitive side of my nature, which it can be hard. So I think the reason why I got into politics when I was a youngster, and I was pretty good at it. Reason I got into community politics in Australia and became the president of the Greek community. Again, I could outfox others when it came to those sort of things. So always tried to take the advantage in that regard. Yes,
probably got another. I'll give it 15 or 20 minutes or so, I guess. If anybody has any pressing questions for me, you're probably too late already because we won't get to it before I leave.
How to fix the fires? You guys, I know what some of these characters are thinking. Oh, we can throw it in there as kindling.
Hey, there's an idea. That's definitely a course of action that would make people feel like they're doing things.
You mean for pseudoscience? That's what she's shilling for.
Scientism.
Yeah. Exactly. Precisely. There is a difference between science, good research, opinions, which are just opinions. It's the lowest form of science. and basically this sort of glorification of science, as if it's sort of, the masters of the universe, these elite academics telling us,
Science is
from a
settled.
pulpit. Exactly. That's a sort of a religious pulpit pseudoscience.
Yep.
No science is settled, even in physics and every facet of science. I can't remember. There was this German academic, and she actually said, I remember her saying that the biggest problem with modern science is that people love really good mathematical, something that looks pretty mathematically, and sometimes they can spend their whole career in this realm of beauty, and even when there is research, which is observed research, measured things, whether it's from a particle accelerator or whatever, it's really hard to basically dislodge these people, their cognitive bias, because it's so perfect, it can't be wrong, sort of this, it's like a religious faith. That's dangerous. And this is why I've said to people, there are two sort of streams within the sciences. There's the skeptical, empirical side, which is what me, Bart, and the traditional, a lot of the scientists, like people like Einstein and like that, were very empiricist. And then you've got the other people that are these sort of rationalists who think that with mathematics, with models, with just thought, not observation, with thought, they can conjure up what nature should be like. That's dangerous.
Can I share my screen for a second? I have a great
go right ahead.
Great favorite meme. Just do my entire screen. Oh, I haven't changed my permissions for this before.
If you put it up, then I can show it. If you share it, then I can pop it on the screen.
I'm not sure if it'll work.
If it doesn't work, just send me the link through the private chat.
Yeah, I won't. I need to change my... here we go. I'll just send you the link.
Yep.
I need to change my Firefox preferences because I can't use my regular browser for StreamYard. Anyway, it's just a little Instagram comic by, I guess you could call him a meme smith, who does a lot of very cutting social commentary with one single panel comics like that. And that one always jumped out at me as a particular favorite for summarizing how science functions these days. It's sad but hilarious.
What did you learn in science today? How to influence social policy by manipulating data.
Yep.
So science. Fucking true.
That's science in a nutshell for what most people think science is, unfortunately.
Yes, that's science is a method of inquiry. It's not basically a policy. Policy can be influenced by research. That's true. But it's not basically, policy can never replace, because policy is something static. It exists at a moment in time. So at every single point in time, there is basically, dialectically speaking, one reality gets negated by a new reality because it's part of basically entropy. Everything in our universe basically is decaying, is changing, is becoming more disordered. That's what entropy is. So we are constantly changing. We are creatures that are being affected by entropy. So in the end, we all sort of die. We all sort of basically turn into dust, so to speak. And people just need to sort of realize this sort of reality. But unfortunately, we're sort of we've created these sort of modern day philosopher kings, that once Plato and people like that, especially Socrates, sort of pushed, that he considered the commoners, or the demos, basically being inadequate, and we needed these experts. Problem with experts is that they are as vulnerable to bias and narrowness in understanding as the rest of us. We all need to keep each other in check. I even said to you guys, if I say something, pull me up, because I could slip up as well. I'm human.
Yeah, it's
That's why democracy is not perfect, but it's the least imperfect system that we've got of checks and balances. But
to
it's
get
not
philosophical about it, it's the difference between absolute and relative truth, right? It's that science is the pursuit of an absolute truth, but it will by definition never get there. That's the
exactly.
It never should, right? You will only ever attain relative truths that are increasingly precise, but they're relative in the sense that we're able to say that this is true in these situations that we've observed. It doesn't mean that it's true in every situation always.
Yeah. And when we're talking about relative truth, it's tied to experimental or observational stuff. We're not talking about sophistry here,
Right.
made up bullshit.
No. Yeah, I'm not.
We just need to differentiate, because
Yes.
a lot of these sophists out there, especially the vegan sophists and all that, they push this sort of relative. Oh, it's all relative to, that
Not
sort of
talking about
sophistry nonsense that they
subjective morality or anything like that.
Exactly.
I think that's horse shit.
It is horseshit, exactly. Yeah, we're talking about objective reality, and you really need something to actually hang your hat on, and our understanding, just with more research and more observations, just becomes more deeper, and will continually become more deeper. And as I've said, with the climate sort of stuff, there's a lot of question marks. It is not settled. Science isn't settled, because there are things that haven't been looked at. For instance, I've talked about the magnetosphere, how it's becoming weaker. And this weakening of the magnetosphere is allowing more solar radiation in. We know that more solar radiation coming in can basically heat the planet, And remember, the greenhouse effect, the greenhouse gases like clouds and things like water vapor have actually increased, and that's been observed as well. And if those things have increased and they're holding more energy from the sun that's coming through because of the weakness of that, why aren't we actually calculating or measuring this? So you've got a group of physicists away here looking at this polar reversal and focused on that, but nobody's actually taking their measurements and putting them into the climate models. Nobody's looking at that. So you've got all these different facets. Then you've got also the data sources that it can be potentially corrupted from certain areas where the topography, or either it's been a topographical change for a point of data capture. So that capture point has been altered. It's been, the station has been moved to another location, different elevation, different temperature effects, one thing, or the environment around that location has changed, which also can have an effect, like the heat island effect, which people used to talk about back in the 70s and 80s, the scientists at the time. And why did that become less fashionable now? Because it doesn't follow a narrative, or doesn't support a narrative. Some of this stuff is pushed to the periphery, and that's when you realize that you're manipulating data to push a narrative, and nothing to do with sort of follow the data, the raw data, and then look at other sources of data that could have a relevant effect. And we're not doing that. And that's where my argument isn't basically that global warming isn't happening. It is. The nature is in constant flux and change. The world around us, our own biology, is in constant flux and change. But the thing is, what are the elements and factors that are at play?
Mm-hmm.
That's where we have the disagreements.
There's a lot of hubris in both assuming that we're capable solely of producing this and solving it.
Precisely. We probably may have a minor effect, but we haven't definitively proven it either way. Some people think we have, but we haven't.
Mm-hmm.
So because they use the sort of examples, like they say, oh, look at Venus. Venus is similar size to Earth.
The runaway greenhouse effect.
Much closer, but also the concentration of that specific greenhouse gas is much higher. When you look at a place like Mars, it's a smaller planet comparative to Earth, and its gases are slightly higher than one of its moons, but that moon is warmer and Mars is colder. So it's there's a contradiction there, and they are a similar distance from the you would think they would be, one would be the other way around if that sort of argument held. Then that doesn't mean it's not a greenhouse gas, but the concentrations are very low, and they're actually similar sort of levels like we would have on Earth. So why we focused on one of these elements, that if we got rid of all the other gases, our planet would be quite cold just from the carbon, and we could increase it multiple times, multiple fold, like go up to 2,000 parts per million, and would still be cold. A very frozen planet would be sort of ice bowl Earth, and we've been there before. But the biggest driver is the sun and its interaction with all these gases and all that. And the other gases are far more important. Why the other greenhouse gases have been demoted and this one has been increased for political reasons is beyond me to that level. See, unlike other people, I don't argue that these are not greenhouse gases, but their concentrations are so small and their effects is so small that it's not the major driver. That is when you look at geological evidence, you see that it doesn't correlate. When you go over very vast distance of geological history and look at basically the relationship between the greenhouse gases, these different greenhouse gases, and temperatures, they don't correlate. Just because they correlate a certain period in time, it doesn't mean anything. That can be by sheer accident. Like, for instance, ice cream, consumption of ice cream and shark attacks. It's just 100 years ago, there were no ice cream trucks. Now there are. It's just a coincidence. But we were still getting, in these periods of time of the year, the warmer parts, we were still getting shark attacks. The only difference is now that there's an ice cream there as well being sold. So that's just a coincidence. It's not basically, a causal factor. And so we have to be very careful about these sort of things. And so it's the same thing with certain gases and stuff like that. Yes, they may have a certain type, I don't deny that they are greenhouse gases, but their effect is so minor, it's irrelevant, And it's the same thing because, one, you've got the carbon cycle, and and when it comes to the carbon that come from organic organisms, it's usually carbon 12, not 13. So that's the difference. One is from shale oil, which is 13, and that tends to stay in the atmosphere a bit longer before it can break down to be recycled, where the other ones recycle through the actual normal, carbon cycle of the planet and the methane cycle. It's the same sort of thing, the organic sort of stuff. And the same sort of with methane as well. It's the same sort of carbon sort of component that it's different. People have seen my methane, debunking study that I actually showed on Bart's, one of Bart's, chats. They just have to go and see that study that came out last year in August of the previous year. And that basically just showed quite clearly that it was bonkers. It was all shale oil that was increasing and animals was actually decreasing on a planetary base. And that's because basically we've brought all these monocrops out. It's the kibble. We've basically felled a whole lot of areas, ecosystems, to basically reduce, and most of them animals are basically feedlots. So we've moved them off the land to make more agricultural land available for the kibble, to grow the kibble. That is what basically is using a lot of petrochemical inputs and increasing.
Mhm.
So the kibble and the petrochemical inputs that is increasing that greenhouse gas component, that carbon 13, that sort of signature. It's in the atmosphere increasing. But again, even that, as I said, is a small player. Such a small, tiny player. We're not going to basically jettison our whole civilization over something so irrelevant or so minor effect. We have to look at these other factors. And what we have to do is we have to realize we can't really change things. And we shouldn't basically play, you know, global engineers trying to put stuff in the atmosphere, because they're talking about putting this sort of silt and other stuff into the atmosphere. Well, that actually does damage to the atmosphere, and also can actually reduce the amount of ozone. That makes it very dangerous, not only for us. I mean, okay, we say, you know, let's say for humans, we can basically put sunblock screen, take vitamin D tablets, or go underground. What happens to the other animals on the planet? What are they? You know, who gives a shit? That's ridiculous. You know, as a policy, and that's being promoted by people like Bill Gates and the people like that are supportive of this sort of social global engineering. Fucking crazies. They should be locked up. They're dangerous with these sort of
No
ideas.
disagreement here.
And the thing is, they are out of control, influencing other crazies in the political arena. That's the last thing we need. This sort of craziness to be promoted. That's one thing. The other side of the actual coin is, see, I got my second wind. The other side of the coin, I must be sobering up. The other side of the coin is that these people will not admit that, you know, what we need is mitigation strategies. We're not going for a disaster. I mean, it's not going to happen, guys. It's all nonsense. But like anyone, when you've got a car or you've got a home that may be prone to flooding or whatever, you take out insurance, or you put up a barrier, or, you know, a retaining wall. That is a mitigation strategy. That's the sort of stuff we can do and say, identify the most riskiest thing and take some mitigation strategies. That is much more doable. All this other stuff is nonsense. You know, all civilizations of the past had environmental pressures. They had massive desertification, massive sort of changes in the levels of water around their coastline. Coastlines that got eroded in ancient times. And populations literally had to shift further inland by doing that. So it's a matter of mitigating and also compensating and bringing some compensation scheme to allow people to move. There are other things that can be done, and they are affordable, rather than, because when you damage the economy and you damage total income of the economy, your GDP's total income, all the activity that happens in the economy. If you pull back on that, what you do is you reduce GDP. And when you reduce GDP, that means the pie becomes smaller for everyone. You reduce living standards and create greater poverty and misery in the society. And with greater poverty and misery, we've seen in a lot of parts of the world, when you create greater poverty, you create more social unrest and even more damage. You only have to see at some parts of the world, like in Africa and elsewhere, where you've had a disintegration of the society and there's been just massive destruction of the environment. The reason why we had that destruction, a lot of those forests in West Africa, which forced the chimps to become savanna type chimps that were behaving like early hunters and gatherers, like early hominins, is because of the change that came from the wars in those war-torn areas. So when you disintegrate a society, that's what you get. You're already seeing it in many parts of the world where there are these stresses and pressures. We do not need to basically, make life more difficult for people. What we need to do is use a lot of that coal that we've got. We've got shitloads of coal, and basically build more coal-fired power stations. But what we do need to do is mandate that these companies basically put filtration systems. I don't give a shit about carbon going out. That's fine. So we don't get all this smog and soot all over the place and whole areas that are basically blanketed in smoke, because that's not healthy for the respiratory system of people. I mean, clean air policy, that's what it did in North America and other parts of the world. In Europe, it cleaned up the air by mandating these companies had to put filtration. That should be a thing of negotiation with the Chinese and say, your companies need to do likewise, and to the Indians and other people. So force them. Yes, it means that that energy will slightly become a bit more expensive for some of those countries, but it will be marginal because their labor costs are very low anyway. It won't be substantial. It will be a small blip that could be compensated by government, which would nip both issues without basically having to really cost anyone anything. So there are many different strategies the way you could do it. You could have a global program to assist some of these countries that are less capable and provide them with technology transfers and stuff like that. So there are multiple ways of doing things much better in a more reasonable way without jettisoning the whole system and impoverishing more people. We've worked very hard to reduce poverty around the world. We don't need to go backwards again.
Yeah, renewables are not the solution that they're touted as yet. The energy demands to build the systems to harvest the renewables will create far more carbon emissions than those renewables will ever save in their lifetime. Assuming that you buy that carbon is even the problem, but using their own rhetoric, it doesn't. There's no internal consistency there.
Precisely. But also the other thing they do as well, a lot of these renewables and all that, they use a lot of certain types of minerals, rare earths and other things that are very important for other industries as well. So when you actually use them in this sort of stupid way, as I call it, because you're basically extracting poor quality energy through immature technologies, and then you're using all that material, you're actually making the cost of a mobile phone or a TV or other appliances that are using those rare earths more expensive. It may be a small amount, but it all counts in the wash. So, and it means that you're able to furnish less of these other things, the comforts of life, so to speak, because you're basically wasting so much in an area where you don't really need to, because it's been pushed by poor science and politics. So you got to measure these. There is always a cost benefit.
Yes.
Whatever you do. Nothing comes for free.
Nothing comes for free. That's a good note to end it on for me tonight, I think, Harry.
Not a problem, mate. It's good to having you here.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to make it for like I said, the earlier part of the stream when I can do it. I'm a little bit more alert, which is important to me to be able to participate that way. So thank you for having me as always.
I appreciate you being here. I think most my subs as well do. Having you here every Saturday. Saturday evening your time.
Yes.
Sunday morning my time.
13 hours behind you, I think I am.
That's it. So, we've got another thing from Lukey.
Oh, I can't leave before seeing this.
Oh, you can't. You can't, exactly. God, I love it. I love it. Yeah, yeah. Definitely rants, really exercise those different muscle groups, especially in the throat. Oh, thanks, mate. Appreciate it. I knew you'd like that one.
All right. Thank you, Harry.
Yep.
And I'll see you next week.
Yeah, definitely. Take care. See you.
Okay, take care, everyone.
Well, back to me. He's off to get his sleep. He needs it. And that was surprising that he would do that. Shouldn't surprise, certain people. I knew he'd probably do that as well. There are certain people that have, that are basically like that, conspiratorial and, with everything. It can be both ends. I'm a sort of a centrist. Can you eat kangaroo? Yes, you can. The most fattiest part of the kangaroo is the tail. Also, the sort of the viscera around the organs as well. But the tail, yeah. So that's the fattiest part. That's the part that the women love because they need a bit more fat in their diet. And the Aboriginal women love the tail. It's a delicacy for them. You two guys having a bit of a pot and kettle affair. Oh, yes, they do. There you go. Trouble's had kangaroo. I've had kangaroo. I've had wallaby. Wallaby's much better, much softer. Um, There's more wallaby in Tasmania. We have some kangaroos, but more wallaby. Wallaby is much smaller. Um, Sometimes harder to actually. Kangaroos are easier to pick off, but the wallabies tend to basically get into sort of the vegetation. And if you're not quick enough, sometimes you can just miss it, and then it's behind some ferns or whatever, and it's got away, and you go, "Oh, where is it?" Try to find it. So it doesn't move as fast as a kangaroo, but it can hide much better. Ah, yes, the evil soy. But even the Japanese, they don't consume a lot of soy. It's it'll either be fermented or it will be soya sauce type thing. So yeah, yeah. Look, a lot of them get directed towards the big end of town anyway, and what they do is they undermine um, sort of the small farmers. They just can't compete against these big conglomerates that are being subsidised. So it's very unfair. And to say, well, they should all get it, well, it doesn't really work that way because they've got economies of scale and they will get a bigger subsidy and they will still be able to unfairly, have a stronger presence in the marketplace. So, yeah, it should, you know, government should be there to regulate misbehavior in the marketplace, but not price fixing or subsidizing players. If you're not competitive enough, you shouldn't be there. Simple as that. Because you basically take away from the productivity of the country. When you take away from the productivity of the country and the society is less productive, the pie or the GDP is going to be less. So you want to basically encourage higher productivity and progress, which will basically bring more benefits ultimately to that society. But at the same time, you don't want players within the society degrading the society, doing the wrong thing. That's where the regulation comes in. So it's a fine balance of having good proper behaviour in the way the operators operate, but at the same time you don't want to like clamp down the capacity for those operators to operate. So it's a fine sort of I don't believe in deregulation on all levels, or high regulation on the other. I believe in a sort of a mixed approach, using regulation where it's needed, but not in areas where it's not. So it has to be a fine sort of tuning in a sense. And societies that get it pretty much right tend to do much better. I mean, Australia through the 80s and 90s tended to get the regulatory side with the market signalling. Initially, they didn't get it that right, but then later on, they learned from those mistakes. They brought in new type of administrations to reform their banking system to prevent this misbehavior within the banking system and moderate it to some extent. And when the 2008 came along, Australia accidentally found itself, its four major banks found themselves in the top 10. That's how bad, that's how bankrupt the rest of the banking world was around the world, because it was so deregulated. The worst, you really, other economic activities in the economy is where you want innovation, like industries that are actually developing new technologies and stuff like that. That's where you want less regulation on those players. You want on the finance side a bit more regulation. Why? Because you don't want speculative parasitic behavior in the economy. You want to support the productive parts of the economy, not the unproductive parasitic type parts. So it's and in the past, if you take a look, America, when it was a great nation, a powerful, big nation, it had a smaller banking sector. It was 10% of GDP rather than 40%, which it is today. Britain, the same thing. And today, and the only reason why Britain is they behave more like Wall Street, and the city in London behave more like, loan, you could say loan sharks, and also as, in moneymen sort of manipulating, protecting people's, putting them into tax havens or whatever else. They're great at doing that. And what it's done is it's allowed other people funnel their money through those entities. And that's what they've done. And so as a proportion of their GDP, that sector's grown disproportionately. And all it's doing is just moving money, paper money around the world from people's profits, who are basically pushing it to those entities. But those societies themselves, in terms of, have become, parts of their society as rust buckets. And a lot of their, working class people and people like that, the ones that didn't find any jobs in the service sector, pretty much are on the scrap heap. And that's what happened in a lot of industrial countries, where Australia, on the other hand, realised this was happening, and they couldn't remain competitive on the manufacturing side to the same level. So they pushed for more innovation in the manufacturing sector, and then sort of pushed towards other sectors like linking our primary goods into China and stuff like that, and that's why Australia's basically got zero subsidies or zero tariffs and stuff like that. We got rid of all that stuff a long time ago, and still we grew over the 30 years of uninterrupted economic growth, where other countries, basically their living standards were doing this, while Asia was doing that. We were going with Asia, not against Asia, again, because of good, smart reforms. The current crop have lost the plot, unfortunately, and seem to not really know on both sides of politics which way to go. So, which is concerning for the future of Australia. But that's another story, another day. But so you can have very good reforms and very poor. So, but again, mine, I don't subscribe to any of the political establishment anyway. I'm a direct democracy guy. So something that I hope that maybe in my lifetime I will see a movement grow within the population. The population will mature enough to realise that they can do things in a different way. But we'll see. We'll see. I don't know. whether I'll live to see it or whether it will happen many decades or hundreds of years in the future beyond my life. Yes, who knows? Yes. Not a good thing. Especially look in the early days, it looked like it was as bad as 1918. And so I was very supportive of basically taking measures to limit the spread. But as more information came through and we learnt that, vitamin D can really nip it in the bud, there was actually a Spanish study as well recently that actually showed that if you take high doses like 20,000 IUs for a couple of days and then drop it down to 10,000, you pretty much, even people that were very sick with comorbidities and stuff like that, they were fine. Where the other people in the trial on the placebo, they didn't do as well. So it's quite clear that when you do get the problem, as I've said to people, take about 4,000 to 5,000 IUs, and when you get the disease, up it. I said 10,000 at the time, but now I'm sort of saying maybe for 3 days, go to 20 and then drop to 10 for the remainder, like this study has shown. And, do the ionophore thing as well, the quinine, and also add the zinc lozenge and stuff like that to reduce the replication issue. So that would be my strategy now. So I sort of modified it slightly with new research, new science, that has come out. And it is a randomized controlled trial, RCT. So it's much better than the epidemiological stuff we've had up until now, which is observational and has confounders as well in it. So that's part of it. So I was a bit reluctant to basically to really go above the 10,000 IUs at the time, because it's not like that. When you actually get it from the sun, you're out in the sun, you get it via your skin. Cholesterol being converted to the pre-activated form, and then it will go through a whole lot of biological pathways where it'll eventually get activated or stored or whatever in adipose tissue and in the liver. So when that sort of process is happening, it's a very controlled way. When you take a supplement, you're just flooding in quite a bit. That's why I've always said, if you're taking high doses, take it with MK4, because you may be taking more calcium in and you need to regulate that additional calcium to make sure it goes into the right place. So that is that sort of balance. Yes, I did, Pim. I did notice you were gone. I was wondering, where is she? So you're back. Good to see you. And yeah, so it's pretty much based on the recent research out of Spain, that RCT. I'm more confident now for a couple of days. And I, even if you don't have, for instance, MK4 vitamin supplement, just go and actually buy Brie. It's very high. Just have a bit more of those sort of foods that have, or liver that's got a bit more MK4 as well. Things like that, eggs, more MK4. So you can add those sort of things in there to add some additional MK4 as your food preferences for that period. Nip it in the bud and then basically drop it off back for a couple of days for 10,000 and then drop back to about, to those lower levels. And if it's cleared out of your system and all that, and you've got some antibodies now to protect you, you really can just go to much even lower levels than that. And if you got sun out and all that, just get it from the sun. Get out there, enjoy the sun a bit more. If you're in the northern hemisphere, you've still got a bit. I mean, I know now that it is becoming autumn, and it is reducing in parts of the world. It's not as strong, so it's much harder. But hopefully, if you were, wise enough, and you went out and actually utilized those summer months and built up your stores, you may not require any vitamin D supplementation because you've got quite a bit there. in that regard. But then again, if you've been indoors, you've been isolating, slapping on stuff, and not you may be very deficient. So in order to know exactly where you are, you need to get yourself checked. And sometimes that is practical. Sometimes it's not practical, depending on where you are on the planet. So I'll leave that up to you guys to work out what's the best approach. And I lost my spot. I hate StreamYard. Ah, damn. Oh, God. Probably is T2. But I think it's StreamYard. Nah, it's definitely StreamYard. Exactly. It does, Christina. That's not your phone. It's me. Yes. Very much nonsense, Lukey boy. Look, yours. Harry is banned from vodka. It doesn't happen before. Didn't happen before. I've been told. Yep. That's certain types of minerals can get concentrated in tobacco leaves. That's true as well. But not to the levels where they are toxic. I think that we've got mixed evidence, both anthropological evidence and stuff like that. So I'm not saying that it's a good thing. And there are other parts of the world where you can actually end up with more in certain types of foods because of the sheer uptake of the soils. So that can be an issue. That's true. So it's a mixed bag. But I'm not promoting tobacco consumption anyway. No idea whether they as a supplementation. Most plants are very poor in MK4. It's all in the MK4 is primarily found in the animal world. I don't know whether I've never heard of MK4 in tobacco plants, but maybe there is. I've got no idea. I think it's unlikely. I think some of the other menaquinones are in plants. Even in dairy, some of the other menaquinones are. But when it comes to animals, whether it's liver, whether it's any of the organs or whatever, it's usually MK4. That's what the body uses. At the end of the day, it converts a lot of the other menaquinones into MK4, even though they still have a lot of them have these additional bonds, double bonds, compared to MK4. And some of that has to get cleaved off in order to basically be converted. But it can still activate some of the osteocalcin and some of the those enzymes that are involved in bone remodeling. So it's because when it comes to osteoblasts, the osteoclasts, from B to C, that's all the changes to basically mean one actually builds and the other one, breaks down. MK4 actually inhibits osteoclasts. So the breakdown of, so it's actually quite important in maintaining good, but also it regulates these sort of enzymes, these collagen degrading enzymes, and also osteocalcin. So it's part of the importance of MK4 But whether there's MK4 in plant, I've never heard of that. I'll have to look it up. But no, I really don't know. I know there are other menaquinones in plants, but I'm not sure about MK4 in tobacco plant. Do know. If anybody knows, please put it on there. Oh, Bart's in the house as well. Good to see you, mate. Want to come on, mate? Tell us how you're doing. Fair enough, mate. Fair enough. If you're tired, I mean, I know you had two live last night, and yeah, I saw part of that, and then I fell asleep because I was just too buggered. I had too much vodka in my system at the time, so I'll have to, after this stream I'll go for a walk, and then when I get back and clear my head a bit, then I'll basically sit down and just watch what I haven't watched. So, with you and Sky, there's probably a few additional laughs that I missed out. So that will be good to check out. I used to like drinking green tea. It tastes good, but I won't be damaging my liver with those. Yeah, definitely not. There's, I know a lot of people say, oh, it's a hermetic effect. Yeah, we don't need that sort of stuff. It's like oxalate. Yeah, that's also gives you a hermetic effect. I mean, so does radiation, People it's too much BS, Everything's hermetic, basically. But too much hormesis will actually harm you. And we've got enough as it is. We've got EMFs, blue light. We've got so many things in our environment. We don't need to add more compared to an ancestral sort of population. We need to sort of reduce the levels of hormesis, not add them, not go out and buy concentrated sulforaphane. I mean, it's just madness, guys. The sort of stuff that people are just peddling out there to make money off the misery of others. More about the smoke and walking. More about the scotch. That was what my mate was drinking, not me. I was drinking the vodka. And move on. Okay, I don't know enough about it. I'll have to check it out. It's pretty good on macular degeneration stuff. I actually like a lot of his stuff. I haven't watched a lot of recent stuff, so I don't know what he's been up to really comment. As I said, I've been looking at a lot of archaeological stuff and a lot of other stuff. Some space-related stuff and looking at space technologies and sort of some new experimental space engines and stuff like that. Not only the ion drives and stuff like that, but other things that are out there that they're being touted about. Even potential for higher sublight speeds and things for potentially manipulating space itself. So it's interesting stuff, but stuff that I enjoy, but I've sort of neglected. As I said to Bart, I sort of gave myself a bit of a rest from the nutritional world for a while. I usually I still go on and watch a bit, and if I find it interesting, I'll watch it. And I usually put a lot of ticks and likes and stuff like that, so I try to be supportive of people. But there's only so many hours in the day that, as you guys know. Is it good to take oxbol to help digest fats? Depends on your circumstances. I have trouble digesting fats, grounded beef. I'm thinking about buying ox bile. Look, if I would actually try and find out what the issue is. Is it your biosynthesis that's the issue? Because it could be that, you know. Is it related to an issue with not enough stomach acid? Is it related to, so it could be a number of factors you need to investigate before you sort of jump on one bandwagon. So that could be an issue relating to gallbladder issues. And maybe you've got some genetic predisposition that you may require more choline to clear out, the bile, and also you may need things like MK4, which are also very important. So MK4 plays a big role in terms of biosynthesis. Then there's the enzyme side of things, which is also MK4 is involved in that, plus retinol a bit as a minor player. There's also things like milk thistle that can improve the functioning of the liver as well if there's some fibrotic material in there and things are not working properly. You may need to take some bile salts for a short amount of time because you may have lost some biles, and they do tend to get recycled at the bottom of the actual small intestine. And if you've actually had a lot of diarrhea in the past and a lot of other issues, gut related issues, you may have lost and need to add some back in. So there could be a number of issues in that regard. So I would try and find out, get a bit more information about what your state of affairs is with your gallbladder and stuff like that, before do a scan or something like that. You could also, under your rib cage, when you're actually consuming, you could actually put your hand right under the rib cage and massage it and all that, and see whether that provides some relief. Have you got some pain there or discomfort when you're eating? That could be a sign that there is some potential sludge or gallstones in there. It's a possibility. So sometimes some people get headaches. A lot of them are due to these sort of gallbladder issues, and it usually comes at around about the time with having a meal and stuff like that, and then getting a headache. And if you sort of massage that area, the actual under your rib cage, not violently, but just mildly, just sort of massage it, it can actually relieve some of the actual tension there and all that, and allow the better flow into the ducts, and that can actually take away the headache as well. So yeah, you may have to investigate it a bit more before splurging out on money, this and that. Have a better understanding, because there is a protocol that I have for basically sort of clearing out a lot of that sort of stuff. There's a number of things like malic acid that softens the actual stones, and a few other things to utilize as supplementation to push get that moving. The whole thing is you want things to be moving in that area and clearing out. So yeah, just drop me an email. But yeah, I would investigate it a bit further. The more you know, the better. But it's a possibility, because you were saying here. But what is funny is how I digest cheese and raw heavy cream just fine. Yeah, look, that was, I've come across that experience with other people as well, where especially with raw stuff, where there is some of the enzymes, and some of the that can actually help to break down this sort of stuff, even though there may be an issue with the sort of inflammation around the ducts flowing through that part of your pancreas, and sort of interfering with some of that, those enzymatic processes, where some of this raw foods have some of that stuff, and it may be that as an issue, and that may indicate to me that it potentially could be gallbladder issue or sludge. Even if you've had some of the stones come out, you may have sludge that is creating issues as well. So it's really hard unless you've actually got you've done some tests to really know. I mean, I had certain issues. This was going back more than a year now, a year and a half, and I had to investigate it. And it took me some time. And I can tell you there were incidents going through the protocol where I had, loose stools or, different things. You tend to basically swing from a sort of a state where you're more, your stool becomes very hard or becomes very loose. And so, you go from this sort of constipated state to a diuretic state and then back again and all that. And I went through that, so that was really annoying in that regard. My father actually had stone, but that actually came out. He actually ended up with pancreatitis, but it literally cleared out at least much faster and gave him a lot of sort of relief. So he had a bit of inflammation for a couple of days, and then he was out of the hospital and he was fine. Didn't have to have his gallbladder actually removed either, which was great. And now he's, fantastic. He can, because now he's sort of more carnivorous recently. I mean, I've shown you guys that some videos he's been consuming more dairy products, more meat and more fats and stuff like that in his diet, and not an issue whatsoever. And he's thriving. He's sort of sarcopenia has been reversed. Everything, is really getting better. So he's becoming stronger now at 85 than what he was in his mid-70s, that he was still declining. So a lot of it's been reversed now, which is good. So Dad's much stronger, and maybe he can get to his grandfather's age of 107. Who knows? But yeah, it just seems very a familiar story. So I did notice you said thanks. Look into it a bit more. Don't neglect it and suffer. There's no need to. Yeah, look, foods actually change the acidity as well. Meat will actually increase the acidity. Simple as that. Other foods that are less will, and if you're actually having too many sort of like people using alkaline drinks and all this sort of stuff, or protein pump inhibitors and stuff like that for many years, that can create a lot of issues. But actually, the funny thing is when you get off those, you end up with more pumps in the actual and creating more acidity. So you end up creating potentially, I've heard of people creating esophageal damage. And I think there's even a condition of people that have been on protein pump inhibitors for many years, even end up with sort of esophageal cancers, even, especially if we're on a sad diet. So it's not something that it's, as I said, if you're on that sort of stuff, you need to transition slowly to down-regulate these pumps, because you don't want these, hydrogen ions, too many being pushed out. So yeah, you've got to be very careful about that. And with the lovely chloride. Now, where am I? Here. It's moved again. Let me just, God, I love StreamYard. Coffee and too much water. Oh, look, people, drinking certain beverages and all that there are different reactions with everyone. So there are so many mixed interactions. Some people can tolerate more something than others. So there are variations. They're genetic, and it's really hard to pin down because we know some of the genetics are involved, but not everything. Pim's laughing about something, I'm not sure. Hey, must be my colourful attitude. See what a bit of vodka does for you, Pim? You're in one of those places. Yes. Yes. Make sure if you're going outdoors to basically try and keep the particulates from getting into your lungs. Really important, because a lot of these can cause a lot of lung issues later on. And the thing is, you don't know what particulates are floating in the air either. So, yes, they can be damaging to your lungs. So keep that in mind. If you have to go out, make sure you've got something to cover your face. And we're not talking about corona here. We're talking about particulates in the air that can be, quite damaging. And also, I would wet the actual, like the thing that you're putting over your, because you're not trying to protect yourself against anything. Sort of, you're trying to get the particulates from that smoke from being inhaled. So if it's sort of moist, like a moist outer part and a drier inner part, sort of thing. So it's usually they like those materials that have got sort of like bilayers, like of material where you can just spray the outside with a spray sort of gun with water and just moisten it a bit without sort of getting it right in, so it sort of can cut off. There are those types. The more thinner masks are more problematic. They are more for unsuccessfully keeping viruses out. See you, Trouble. Yes, I suspect that's about Eric. Yes, easy to push that sort of stuff. Yeah, it's sort of crap. People don't need it. Just as long as people are eating real food, that's all people really need, and only strategically supplementing when it's required. You know too much, Kitty. Yeah, look, some of the information, that sort of isn't too bad, but if you jettison some of the other nonsense, for somebody coming off a sad diet, they could do worse. Yep, you're welcome. Yeah, but I will check out what he actually said, because I'd find it interesting. Yeah. Look, the body generates some, and it needs some, but it doesn't, and if you take from outside, as I said earlier, you do deplete heavily sulfur. That's not a good thing. So, it's bad enough most of our food supply and most of things in our environment are very sulfur poor. We don't need to add to the misery. Yes, exactly. So what's Pim's? Fair enough. You gotta go. You gotta go. Yes, they need their walk. I did 15 Ks yesterday, and then I hit the booze. Yeah, I know. Not the right way of actually stopping getting a good hermetic effect, and then just dousing it down with a whole lot of alcohol on top. Yeah, wonderful. I do these crazy things. Sometimes I lose control, Pim. Does he? His the feline level in that household is quite high. If you realise that. Oh, can't get any raw milk. That's a bit disappointing. Yeah, look, my younger sister that's moved over to Perth has had issues trying to find. She's actually located, but it's inconsistent, and she's not really happy about it either. So yeah. Thanks, mate. You always, the thing is, never say you've got too much, because then when you give them too much, they go, wow. But if you say, oh yeah, it's 12, they go, oh yeah. When you don't perform up to 12, then they go, oh, this is disappointing. That's the trick. Yep. Yeah, I'll find it. Because I've already, I know he's, but I've basically, I think I sub, but I don't have notifications from him. For the simple reason that I just don't have the time to actually watch everything. So I just keep notifications on for the people that I do want to watch to be notified about. So it does vary in that regard. For those new to, what's that? With questions, hang in there. It can take a while. Yes, it can take a while. And sometimes it can be a prolonged, answer. As I've been told from Bart, he says, summarize it in 5 minutes. I can't do that very easily. He's actually asked me, I did say to him that I was going to summarize something for him last night, but, I was on the booze. That didn't happen. Because he wants me, we're going to do something together on some matter, and he wanted me to summarize it a bit more. And I said, look, I may be able to get it down to 10 minutes, but I'm not getting it down to 5 minutes. God, slave driver. Yes, sometimes pretty hard. I do like telling stories, and sometimes to put it in that sort of fashion that's understandable for people, it's just an easier way. I could basically just summarize the actual, just exactly what's in the abstract or the summary part, and just focus on that. But I do want to nuance things. I've got my own opinions on things. So, as you guys know, I don't go with just what's there. I will have my own opinions on how I think these researchers have, commented on certain things. So, well, that's me anyway. Yes, Lukey. Yes, getting the raw milk through. Not always easy. Look, there's mathematics and there's mathematics. Mathematics is a really great way of actually explaining both observations and how things work. But the danger is when you replace mathematics with observation. That's where the risk lies. Now, Galileo was basically an empiricist. That means he observed things. He used telescopes. He used instruments to measure things. So he came from a different tradition. So for him, mathematics was the language that explains the universe, but it doesn't replace it. You still need to basically prove that something happens in a certain way or behaves in a system in a certain way. And that's where you need to do research. Because you can hypothesize or write any sort of mathematical thing, because there are ways, like string theory and parallel universes and all that. And you can create mathematics that actually show this, but there's no experimental proof. And then in recent times, there was basically where mathematics, this is an easier way of putting it, mathematics preceding observation is bad. Mathematics following observation is good. So that's the difference. So it's not the maths, it's the way it's actually being used as a tool, because that's what it is. It's a tool, a language. So you can use language in a foul language, as in an inappropriate way or an appropriate way. And so when somebody does a research and actually, looks through a telescope or measures something or whatever, or uses a particle accelerator to measure certain things, or the way subatomic particles behave. Well, when you do that, you're actually measuring things, and then you're confirming mathematical theorems or not. So you've got mathematical hypotheses, then you test them, then you go, oh, we've observed something different than what the maths actually show, so that it's incorrect. We have to modify the maths. And that's what they do, But people that basically say, glorify maths, this sort of rational way, this sort of other stream that came into existence in the early part of the sort of later part of the 19th century, early part of the 20th century, is a very different type of model. And they are rationalists, not empiricists. And they think that they can use this sort of language of the God, mathematics, to basically tell us what the universe is really about, without having any, without enough sufficient experimental stuff. And it's the same thing with all these models. They say we can model the climate. No, you can't. You don't have the supercomputers to model it. And so what they say, well, we can estimate and approximate some of these other factors and throw them into the model. Yeah, but it's not based on observational truth. It's basically based on, poor measurements, or, and extrapolating from those poor measurements. Do we have weather stations on every continent in the same uniform way? No. If you've got a weather station here, here, and here, but not over here, you're going to get because of the topography, a very different measurement. And then when you try to average that out, it's not going to work. You're going to get, if it's in this part of the world and you look at the stations only and that, and get an average, you'll get a different measurement. If you look at another country, you'll get a different. Well, unless you have uniform around the world to be able to measure different climatic, different elevations and all that, and then extrapolate from all that and get an average, you're really basically making shit up. And this is the problem that we face ourselves, where, mathematics and models have become more important than observation, the traditional empirical way. So, yeah. So that's how, the older scientific method, or the way traditionally science was, which was very much empirical, observational. It went back to the tradition of the ancient Greeks. They observed, they used parallax, they used a whole lot of instruments to measure things, to be able to determine the way, the world around them was. They measured it. They experimented. Archimedes did experiments on to work out the gold content of certain metals. Whether there were other metals in the gold that his king had asked him to. So the water buoyancy and all these sort of things. So all these sort of came out of experimentations and actually, looking and observing. Some of the stuff that's recently come out has come out of mathematical speculation. And that's dangerous, because that leads you down a garden path of nonsense and pseudoscience. And to a large extent, like string theory and all this other nonsense out there, is basically, a lot of it's just pseudoscience. People have spent whole careers building an edifice of mathematical beauty, which is just basically, when you look at experimental stuff, more and more new experiments that are being done, both at CERN with the particle accelerator and all that, are starting to rip apart the foundations of these rational thinkers. So, and that was going to happen. So these people just think they're gods on earth and they really know it all. What a bunch of wankers. We're not even at we're still at civilization 0, not even at 1. We don't even know what exists in the oceans of the world, let alone understand these complex systems to the level that we think we do. Yeah, don't get sucked in by attractive, beautiful looking mathematical models. They are very deceptive and can lead you down the wrong path. Well. More birds turning to feather dusters. So, a new role for you, mate. Oh, precisely. You got to always go back to ice cream. You should know that. T1, you know, it's got to be the creamy sort. You're welcome. Let me sort of flew through some of this. Didn't realise I was that far behind. There's a good buy for Jared. God, how far behind am I? Anyway, keep on going. Food. Yeah, the sun is getting a bit stronger in that regard. And I just lost my... Oh, God. This is hard. This is hard when StreamYard just knocked me. So I lost my spot. I suspect Bart's talking about some drink. Any thoughts on buffalo and venison versus beef and pork? They do vary nutritional profile. I mean, pork's got more niacin and thiamine compared to these other meats. But these other meats have got a different amino profile, some differences in fatty acids and all that. So I've always said, try to mix it up, but having more pork through the week isn't going to, the body can handle it. It's like a Swiss Army knife. You may have to transcript more enzymes to basically use some of the essential amino acids to get certain other types out of it. Because there are certain things like beef and buffalo and stuff like that probably have more taurine and more certain other types of aminos. So, but the bodies are very adaptable, because it's always in a food environment that's always changing naturally. So it's not a bad idea to sort of flow, have a bit of beef, a bit of pork, a bit of buffalo, a bit of venison, different things, play around with foods, a bit of seafood and stuff like that. I find that it's a better approach. It sort of because they have different concentrations in terms of minerals and vitamins, the micronutrients in particular. So it's not a bad idea. A bit of raw stuff as well is good. I had some cured raw meat yesterday with my mate. I ended up eating most of it, but anyway. But so that sort of stuff is as well, fermented stuff as well. But don't overdo the fermented stuff. I always say, you need some, but not too much. If you've got gut issues, definitely keep away from that sort of stuff, anything fermented, until you resolve those things. But if you don't, if you're fine, yeah, get a bit of that sort of stuff in to you, which is good, and so it's got benefits. And it also plays a protective role as well, getting a bit of that stuff. Not a lot, you don't need a lot, but getting a bit to basically, because you're always going to be affected by pathogens in the environment and stuff like that. And sometimes you need some of these beneficial to rebalance. but let's not over exaggerate that point, so. And I've missed a few here. Look, just ask me again, because the StreamYard thing is sort of, I went all over the place and, sort of lost some of this sort of stuff. I think I saw one here of Luke's, magnesium. Yeah, look, a number of, you don't need as much as on a plant-based diet. Magnesium, you will burn a lot of magnesium on a high carbohydrate diet. It's like thiamine, you're using double. And it's similar to magnesium. You're using organ meats are very good, and a lot of seafood are very good for magnesium. But even regular meat and all that sort of stuff, you have to remember that as long as you're keeping your sodium up and maintaining that sort of homeostasis between the other minerals, it's your body's got ability to recycle those and keep them in the system. You're only going to dump if your insulin drops too low and you've got insufficient sodium to keep it all together, and then you dump fluids and everything. And it's usually those transitional times. But if you're, salting your food, getting enough mixed animal foods, you don't really need any of this supplementation. You don't really have these issues. You will know, because you will get, things like cramps and all this sort of stuff. I mean, I'm 15 K walks yesterday. I didn't get any cramps. I woke up fine. The only thing I had, it was a bit of a, from the alcohol effects, but no cramps or anything like that. So we get plenty in our diet. Let's put it that way. Let's not over exaggerate. It's only when we have these electrolyte imbalances, when we're transitioning in particular, especially people that have come off a really high carbohydrate diet and really high insulin levels or insulin resistance, where you're holding in, like there's no tomorrow fluids. And then you eventually at some point, most people sort of will either, traditionally people went from low carb diets to keto diets, and they sort of transitioned paleo. It's the way I did it: paleo, then low carb, keto, and onwards. From there, just removing more and more of the plants. And so I never had these big transition problems, because I'd become more insulin sensitive, and I had less of this sort of, my blood pressure was more normal. All these sort of things had become more normalized with these other previous diets, and I sort of transitioned much easier. If you're coming off a really, I tend to say to people, consume a bit more things like, if you can tolerate it, dairy, maybe whey, things like that sort of those carbohydrate or insulinogenic type foods for a while as you're transitioning, so you don't have this massive drop in insulin so you sort of transition as if you were doing some of the other diets and transitioning, so it's a bit more smoother in that way. So you're not as, it's not as bang, and you're dumping like mad all these electrolytes and creating electrolyte imbalances, because the body, if you've dumped out a whole lot of potassium and magnesium and all that out of the cell, what the body will do is actually will start dumping out sodium to try and get a new homeostasis. So because there has to be maintained in order for proper intra and extracellular sort of fluids to be managed properly. So these are sort of the reasons, and also, hormones, start getting activated as well, in order to sort of manage all that. So you'll know in that regard. So what you need to do is only really worry if you've got a problem like cramps and stuff like that. And I usually just say, well, get some Epsom salts, put it in a bath, up your sodium, soak in some of that through your skin, is a good thing. Probably a bit more crustaceans and stuff like that. Or maybe if you don't want to do that sort of food, take a supplement for a short amount of time. So there are different, electrolytes, stuff like that, just to get certain levels, and then get back to a proper homeostasis, and then move on from there. And then it just should be the regular salting and food that should manage that, because you only, in terms of potassium and magnesium and all these, you only have a small amount of excretion that actually happens in a normal, when people are balanced, their insulin is not making these massive movements. Things usually normalize, and you only have small amounts of secretion, so you get enough from the food. It's only when your electrolytes being pushed out of balance, that's when you have to intervene, put all the stuff back, whether you supplement it or stuff like that, get it to a good level, stabilize it, keep the sodium up, allow the body to sort of just come back to a new homeostasis, and it usually resolves everything. That's how I've done it whenever I've sort of got myself out of whack for whatever reason, severe dehydration in the tropics or stuff like that. I've just done foolish things and ended up, really severely in one way or another. Then I've just sorted it out that way. So, just nip it in the bud immediately and just get on with your life. It's not too complicated. But if you want a few tips on exactly the best, I may actually do something at some stage on magnesium, just going through all the different foods and the amounts, or you could Google it yourself and find out. Yep, I know the feeling. Vodka does that to you. For me, definitely. See, even Chris, milk and can have an effect as well on people. Not a problem, mate. He is still 30 minutes out of noticing that I've gone. No, I haven't. She's on a mobile phone. Focus on the dogs. Get off your mobile phone. Oops. But downsizing. Okay. Move on until I find another nutritional question. Yes, that can be dangerous when you overthink certain things or think you know things. Yes, very much applied science and research. Most of the, when you look from antiquity onwards, they were very much empiricist in that spirit where you did experimental, observational stuff. So in that, some of these terms officially came much later, but it's really that sort of that approach was really going back to that tradition. G'day, mate. Good to see you. You're an animal. God, we're at the bottom. I've probably missed a few. Sorry if I have. It's been a more erratic, you could say, stream today. I do apologise. I'll have to avoid going around to Jake's place. God. Yes. So I'll bring it on myself. Any other questions, guys? We haven't had really a lot of dietary, or we've talked about a whole lot of subject matters today. If people haven't got their questions in, and there are medical things and stuff like that they do want to ask, or protocols about how to do this or how to do that, just email me. And it sometimes takes a couple of days. There is one there. I noticed I missed it. It was further down. I actually missed it. One of Taro's. So if you're listening to this, mate, I will get back to you next week. I don't have time this Monday, and today I'm trying to basically finish off some other stuff that I'm committed to. So once I get that out of the way, and some of it's work related as well, So once I actually sort that out, then on Tuesday, I will take a look at your email and anyone else's after that, because I've pretty much covered everything else. So I'm down to very few that need to be replied back to. So, and a lot of them were a lot of protocols, on the sort of bone health and how to sort out osteoporosis and stuff like that, and some with hormone related issues and whatever else. So, which is good because I've answered them. So if other people have similar effects, I'll just copy and paste, which makes it very easy since I've got standard answers now and all that. I just, at some stage, I will have to do some standard, videos covering these points in that regard. But occasionally I do change things around. I add a few new things. There's a couple of things that my protocols have been altered in some regards, a few of them. And a few of them I'm sort of investigating some new areas of research to see whether certain dosing can be slightly modified. So, expect some changes to my taurine supplementation. So I'm looking into a number of things now, and it's, some effects in the brain and a few other parts of the body. So I will be slightly altering some of the things that I actually provide on that regard. So expect things to be slightly altered in the not too distant future. Any other questions, guys? We've got about 9 minutes to go. It's a countdown for 3 hours. So if you've got something to ask, please do it right now. Just get it in there. It can be on any subject matter. It doesn't have to be, completely health related. So nothing, anything. Volcanic Hawaiian water. Okay. Tero just woke up. Yeah, I don't know enough about it. I don't know its composition, so I can't really comment what it is. I'll look into it. So do ask me next week. I will definitely look into it. When people ask me something that I haven't actually seen before, I do go away and actually find out about it, and then look at the trace minerals. So I've basically, I use a sort of a trace mineral supplement, which is a colloidal mineral from King Island in Tasmania, to the north of, it's one of our northern islands of our state. And it's got all the different, minerals, trace minerals. So that's what I use. And it's much closer to the profile that you really need, in a sense. But I don't know enough about the volcanic water that you're asking, but I will look into it and find out a bit more about it, and then just do a comparison between the two to see what are the levels of the different trace minerals and stuff like that, and see whether if it falls within a very similar level, it may be fine, maybe, very good. Because the problem is our soils are piss poor in terms of and even some of the soils that are basically where there are now pastured animals, those soils were poor agricultural soils that were basically turned, you could say, improved. But again, they're not going to have the content. We know that from USDA data and other data from other organizations around the world, departments and ministries, where they've looked at their soils, the content of certain minerals has gone down by anywhere but 10 to 20 fold. So even pastured animals, they're not going to get the same level of mineral nutrition from the plants into their bodies So some of that's been, we've eroded. And so to some extent, I'm not constantly taking colloidal minerals, or trace minerals supplements, but I occasionally do it once every 3 months. I will basically go out and buy a supplement, and I'll go right through it over a couple of weeks. And I just basically, top myself up a bit in a sense, and I try and get some seafood, because one nice thing about seafood is the oceanic sort of foods are much more stable. But the only problem is if you're in the southern hemisphere, you're pretty lucky. In the northern hemisphere, there are a whole lot of issues with, contamination, bacteria, certain types of heavy metals and pollutants, dioxins and PCBs, and it just goes on and on and on. And so you really have to be careful about the sourcing in the northern hemisphere, and that's where you got to be careful with that sort of stuff. So yes, you're welcome, mate. About the magnesium, steady intake increase in regarding to look, anything that requires more energy remember, it's magnesium ATP. It just to basically create energy as a process of oxidative phosphorylation requires magnesium. But you don't need excessive, you need a certain amount. The problem, magnesium is used for a lot of biological processes through the body, not only for energy production. And it's usually when you're consuming a lot of carbohydrates, carbohydrate metabolism requires far more. Even in the mitochondria, it's a far more, it's where, the sort of level, it's more higher energy demand, and it also creates more reactive oxygen species, carbohydrate sort of energy. But at the other point, while that may be the case, it's still, we still need a certain level, and we can get depleted for a number of different reasons. So it really depends whether you need it. It's if you're getting cramps and stuff like that, it's either a lack of sodium, and if you've got good levels of sodium, then it must be magnesium or potassium, and then you may have to supplement for those. That's how if you increase your sodium and your cramps go away, you've fixed it. It was not getting enough salt in. But if it doesn't go away, then basically you need to add a bit more magnesium and potassium in it. So get it in there, rebalance to the new homeostasis, and then basically keep the sodium up, where it will lower the excretion and loss of magnesium and potassium, which you'll get anyway from the food. So you'll be able to maintain good homeostasis. So, you don't need to be supplementing forever, so to speak, because what all you do is you supplement forever, and it's used for certain process, and the body goes, we've got excess magnesium here, it'll start dumping. You'll lose it. So you'll be throwing money away for no good reason. So there's, probably somebody on a SAD diet probably needs more magnesium, because they are losing quite a bit and using quite a bit on their SAD diet. But, if you've got a clean the diet, less of a problem. 9 minutes. Yep. Limited time. Yep. I know. It's awful. Let me just find it. And this is the one here. Hold on, where is it? There it is. Let me just share that. Oops. It's that one there. King Island colloidal minerals. These are all the amounts. Yeah, I don't know about any other website. There may be other websites as well. Yeah, so and so where were we? I've dropped the link in there. Not a problem. You're welcome. Yeah, so that's what I mean, because it's probably not magnesium. It's probably sodium, or it could be potassium. Too little, not enough potassium. That can be an issue as well. So you may need to get something like either an electrolyte version, or maybe get a bit of cream of tartar and work out the amount that's in the cream of tartar, that specific brand, and then work out the quantity that you're basically going to then put in to get the high, not too high, because remember, we don't want too much potassium. That can create heart palpitations and all sorts of issues, don't do anything like that crazy, but just put the amount in there, and then basically from there, do it for a couple of days. You're keeping the sodium levels up. It'll rebalance all that. You'll lose a bit of potassium. You'll lose a bit of sodium, and that will then find a good new homeostasis, and that will fix the problem. But yeah, it's usually stuff like that, mate. Yeah, just play around. Yep, not a problem. And you're welcome. And we're past the 3-hour mark. And all I can say is, thanks, guys. I appreciate you turning up to listen to me. And I do apologise that I haven't been on the mark as I normally am. A bit more quicker on the mark. I'm a bit sluggish, but yeah, that will be resolved next week. I'm just going to go for a bit of a walk. I may actually take a bit of a nap and then go for a walk. I'm a bit tired in that regard. So yes, got to keep away from too much. Yeah, look, it's got an added benefit. So if you've got a bit of oxalate, the citrate can help with that as well. So it's not a bad thing. At the end of the day, as long as it's a good quality source, because you don't want to be taking it for too long. It's just as a short-term intervention to just rebalance things. Always see things like that. Supplementation is there to supplement a deficiency as a short-term intervention. It's not a lifestyle. You need to be eating foods to get these things in the right amounts and stuff like that. So keep a focus on doing that sort of stuff. Just let me find the. So this is a pretty. If people are unaware of this, I'll just put this on the board up here. So this is not a bad site. So I'll stick that there. And let me just turn that off, and let me just share this. This is quite helpful. It's a useful site. It's called Self Nutritional Data. It's got some dietary nonsense on it, obviously, but you can actually select, like, I don't do it on calories. I do it basically on grams of the food that I'm going to consume. You could do it on calories, but primarily the grams to be able to work out. And then you can actually select any one of these. I don't bother with any of these sort of things. If they're coming from animal foods, the fats are going to be fine. I don't care about the cholesterol. If you really want to maximize the profile of your amino acids, you can look at certain types of amino acids. As an example, let's say for cysteine, and then go and do a bit of a search, you'll get a list. They've got all sorts of, even the dried white parts of the egg, which is primarily coming from, these processed sort of eggs or whatever. But as you can see, things like the type of aminos that you would want for collagen type things, proline as well. Eggs are pretty good sources of that sort of stuff. Now, they do have here soy protein isolate. I mean, for fuck's sake. But, obviously because they've extracted it, yes, but it's not the, it's going to be, because of the extraction process in particular, these ones, the plant-based ones, because of the extraction, but it actually ends up with far more deuterium. So no, they are very bad protein sources. So especially for your body. But you can actually look up other things as well that you may. I'll just go to. I won't bother with, go with proline. So you can see gelatin is, it's just massive, which is on pork and stuff like that, you'll get the gelatinous material, that's where you'll get more. Pork is really good, the pork fat, because you've got the bilayers below. So you've got all the actual fats in there. And on top of that, you've got that skin rind and all that, which is all that gelatinous sort of thick collagen. Fantastic. You can't get any better. Low deuterium. It's not going to basically, it's going to create cleaner metabolic water, so it's going to be less damaging to your mitochondria, being lard. And on top of that, you've got the added benefit that it has all these additional aminos. So because some people maybe, let's say, they've got a sensitivity to eggs, and they can't get some of these collagen aminos. They don't want to be doing bone broths every day as well. And so there's your option at looking at, sort of pork skins and stuff like that. So you can see eggs are always popping up and stuff like that. And all the other stuff is the processed soy isolates and the soy flours and stuff like that, which is all the shit, with all the anti-nutrients and everything else in there. So, because basically when you actually look at the plant profile and the bioavailability in actual plants, it's crap. And we know it. They have to create it in these sort of industrial processes and all that sort of stuff. See, pork flesh as well. Oops. Bit hard to actually. So you can do a right mouse button, open it up in a separate one. And you can basically, you can do it in ounces as well. So if you just, all the amounts of stuff, it's in grams primarily. There may be a way of actually changing the stuff for North Americans. And you can actually see the quantities in different parts, how much they've got, aminos, minerals, or whatever else. So it's not a bad source of information for different sort of foods that you're going to be combining to be useful, to play around with some of the stuff and look at categories, whether it's sort of, your poultry, beef, pork, usually not for this one, for the aminos, but some of the vitamins and all that, you do actually get the dairy stuff here and all that. I don't know why that category didn't come up in this one. Yes. Oh, that's up there. There it is. It's only got 3. So you can go into there, let's say, as an example, and see the type of dairy egg that would have that. And they're looking at the higher amounts, obviously. So they give them priority in that regard. Now, if you're looking at, so you've got all these different, you've got retinol, pretty much these carotenoids, I just don't waste my time. You really want basically the retinol to look at that. You can actually see the other subfractions as well. So you can actually look at vitamin E foods and then look at the other sort of subfractions as well. So you can, there's your thiamine, riboflavin, and all that sort of stuff. And then don't waste your time with folic acid. Focus on folate, because that's the actual animal form. So things like that. Unfortunately, the K1 is everything. All the Ks, K1, K2, K3. You know, it's the whole, the K1, K2 and all the menaquinones are all lumped together, which is really annoying. That's the only thing that I really have. One of the things that I've got to, I'm really annoyed with the actual, with this database. They could have actually done it a bit better. So you can look at potassium as an example. And as you can see, cream of tartar, 100 grams of cream of tartar is just massive, 16,500 and all that. And so if you're trying to deal with just replenishing a deficiency, probably, you know, if you want to look at, because you're going to get some from food and all that, and you look at your, you know, because usually a big steak will probably give you anywhere between 13 to 1,700. So you probably only need this amount from cream of tartar for a couple of days just to get the levels up to very good levels, and then you know, get your new homeostasis. So if you're looking at that, you can go divide by 16,502. That's about 15%. So 100 brings it down to 15 grams, and divide that by 28.33333333, and we get about half an ounce. So you could put that in a smoothie, or you could put that amount in of cream of tartar in basically something like a yogurt, or, you know, a high-fat, healthy yogurt. Which also dairy is a very high source of potassium as well. Let's not forget. There's a lot. That's why the Maasai actually use blood, as I've told you guys plenty of times in the past. So yeah, so this is a quick fix. You can go. It's a baking agent. You can go get cream of tartar, put work out the appropriate amount, and use it for a couple of days. Done. You've sorted things out, and it's a cheaper option than some of the electrolytes, because you can just punch that up, get a cheap magnesium supplement, or use Epsom salts, bang up your your sodium, rebalance things out, done. Get on with life. You know, don't complicate things. So there's these things. I mean, even coffee is a good source. Fairly good source. You know, so yes, it does have oxalates, and it is the bioavailability is not the same as something as refined as this. So yeah, your options are there, and this could be useful for information of that sort. You know, so I hope that we've got a bit over, but that's okay. I just wanted to cover a few of these points and sort of just help people with using some of these tools. I wouldn't, you know, these sort of calorie ratio things and all that, these are a bit idiotic, and they usually have some of the worst nutritional advice, and that I usually just focus on the nutritional search tool and focus on foods that are pretty much higher in certain things. And in some cases, there may be legitimate reasons because of certain health reasons or issues, to basically find out low things and stuff like that. And it may be that certain people in your family may still want to eat certain carbs, and you may want to actually see which have got the lowest amount of sugars in them. So at least you can help them transition in that regard. So, you know, so the less of certain things. And there are legitimate cases where people may have very high amounts of certain types of minerals in that regard for whatever reason, some past things that they did to themselves, and they may want to find out how to avoid some of these foods for a while, so until they sort of rebalance themselves. So it has a lot of usefulness both ends in that regard. Most of us will be focused on what is high and try to work out how to balance certain foods. And it's not a bad idea just to go through and say, these are the things that I like to eat. Get a piece of paper, write down a list of all the foods you enjoy. And then once you've worked out that, go away and actually check to find out what their nutritional status is. Remember, you probably need more riboflavin, is a good thing. Thiamine, if you're getting close to 100%, fine. If you're getting 60%, that's fine as well, because we need about half. It's always better to be a bit higher with thiamine, because you never know. Sometimes there are a number of things that can actually require a bit more. So, and I've always said pork, bacon are very high sources of thiamine. The old bacon and eggs in the morning that a lot of people used to do. Get plenty of thiamine out of that. So these are the sort of things you guys can then mix around and play around with certain animal foods and work out certain combinations to get certain things up. So riboflavin, you want higher, obviously, especially on a carnivore diet, you need more. Thiamine, you don't need as much. And it's the same thing for basically things like magnesium as well, But it depends. As I said, if you've had an electrolyte issue, that's when it becomes important. If you haven't, then what you get from the food usually is more than enough in that regard, because you only get small amounts of losses in that regard. So okay. So I think that's about it. I will leave it at that. I just wanted to cover that point. Let me stop that. Anyway, guys, I had a good time. I enjoyed it. I'm going to go away and do something with myself. Anyway, I may actually go and I do have Epsom salts. I may just go and just have one of those really nice, relaxing baths. Actually, that's not a bad idea. I may actually do that. The shower was too quick in the morning. Was in and out, not long enough. 5 minutes in, out. Yeah, one and a half lathers. Yeah, it's always a rush. Anyway, guys, thanks. Take care, and I will see you all next week. Appreciate you guys being here. I hope some of the information, if I haven't covered some points, just email me, send me an email. It may take a couple of days, but I will get back to you next week at some point. So if there's any protocols that people want, please let me know. If there are specific types that people, because I haven't covered every point, it's in my head, or I've got a whole lot of PDFs, but I just haven't collated it together. I can collate it together. So if there's a specific ailment or whatever, I've done a number of things now. There's a couple of on cancer and a couple of other things that I've actually covered. So if but there are always sort of these sort of funny ailments that other people have that are not the stock standard. So I'm evolving my protocols. So I have the stock standard ones, but then there are things, and I know some of you guys that have used the bodybuilder, the traditional bodybuilder that the old bodybuilders used to use formula, protein formula, the eggs and dairy type thing. So if anybody needs that information, just send me an email and I'll cut and paste that information, send it through to you. That's an easy one. Do put on your headers when you're on the subject matter, put the reason why you're actually emailing me. Sometimes if it's, if people are really in a difficult spot, I will prioritize them, and sometimes I will also provide them with like sort of a free consultancy if they're in a, as you guys know, I do very few consultancies, but for people that are really like I've got only a couple of years to live or really are in a real mess. So it's limited to those. If it's something which is less of a big issue, I don't do consultancies. I usually say go to people like Bart or Pim. But if it's something which is really, as you know, things that are where you're really concerned about, life and death sort of things, I can cover that. Yeah, it's an association. It is an association. There's research to show that, but it's an association. We haven't proven causality, so there is no causality. But I don't think having less or more is going to basically deal with a cancer issue. There are specific protocols. There's actually metabolic water. That means it could be a number of things. When it comes to cancer, depending on whether you've gone through chemotherapy or whatever, how much damage you've done to your mitochondria, whether you need to flush out more metabolic with cleaner metabolic water, flush out a lot of the deuterium loading. There's a component about melatonin, blue light. It's a much more, people that have come to me with these issues, there's a long list of things. It takes far too long. But if you've got issues associated with that sort of stuff, send me a link and I can provide all the information where to get and source the different things that you need to deal with these things. Because and this is not, it's not sort of herbal remedies or stuff like that. That's nonsense. That's just crap. This is stuff that actually is repairing or silencing things. Like with the actual brain, phosphatidylserine actually silences genes and improves cognitive, but also there are a number of other things that are as well in that protocol that are involved. So phospholipids, choline, taurine, and they have different levels of requirements for different, so the dosages are different based on studies that actually have demonstrated reversal or stopping something from progressing further. So these are basically not sort of pie in the sky sort of thing like a lot of the other naturopathic nonsense. Take this herbal thing, stick it up your ass, and you'll live forever. No, that's just nonsense. You guys know me for far too long, and you know how I look at science. And if there is science that actually demonstrates certain mechanisms, certain genes can be turned on, turned off, certain mechanisms and processes can be modified or whatever, that's what we use. We use these things to manipulate our genes and manipulate our body in a certain way to get certain results. That's what we're doing. We're biohackers. We're not basically these, airy-fairy, nonsensical crap out there. So it's stuff that actually we know works. I mean, depleted deuterium water is used as an anti-cancer agent within the European Union for dogs. I say, if I get cancer, treat me like a fucking dog. So there are ways of actually dealing with these things. And there are ways of also fixing mitochondrial damage and stuff like that. So it does take a number of months doing these sort of things. It doesn't happen instantaneously. Nothing does. It took you years and months to damage your body. It takes some time to repair the body and fix the mitochondria in particular, because things are at the heart are a mitochondrial disease. And if we go even further, there is basically, certain subatomic particles and, you know, electrons and ions that are basically, you know, miscommunicating and moving and behaving in inappropriate ways at the much deeper level in that regard. So, but we won't go into that complexity. I mean, you know, I sort of have some of these conversations now and then with certain people, and Bart and people like that. It's a sort of a, you know, the Jack Kruse stuff, that sort of stuff. It's all biophysics and stuff like that. But I'm more into taking that information and converting it to solutions for people's problems, you know, because I mean, I've been a sufferer myself with health issues, and that's where my focus is. So, you know, what's that? Dan, now both Harry and Bart are live. Is he gone live, has he? Fair enough. I better go then and jump on his and find out what he's up to. Anyway, guys, thanks. See yous. Have a good weekend, and see yous next week. Take care.